Gosh, we shouldn't be here.
Okay, she's close to the door. All right. Hey, can you hand me a pen, please? Pen here? Pen. Oh, yeah, me too. Thanks. All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Town of Arlington Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting for Tuesday, September 3rd, 2019. Please note that everyone is here. And if everyone will please stand for the opening prayer by Alderman Jeff McKee, and please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight, and Lord, we just rejoice your name. Lord, we thank you as a town for everything and the blessings that you have given us. And Lord, we just want to pray over our country. Lord, pray over our county and the city of Memphis and our town of Arlington, Lord, just for our safety. Lord, for wisdom tonight. We just ask you that you cover each one of these members up here and our citizens as well. We lift all these things up to you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Mrs. Reeder, since this is the last official in this capacity, if you'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. All right. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the August 5th, 2019 meeting and the special called meeting on August 20th, 2019?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Brooks, second by Mr. Biggs. Remember, this is both sets of minutes. Any questions or discussions on that? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes. Next up, we have grievances and comments from citizens. Now, I do know that there's an item on here that I think that has drawn some people here that we have a public hearing on. So if you are here to speak on what the land use or something along that line, if you'll please wait to the public hearing on that. And so the grievances and comments from citizens now are on any particular topic in town. And those can cover things that may or may not be on the agenda. Please note that it's not necessarily, we don't usually do a Q&A back and forth during the meeting, but if we can answer the questions briefly, we'll try to. If not, staff will take notes and get back with you. So is anyone here to speak on any particular topic like that in general? If so, just raise your hand and you can come forward. Miss. Okay, well, come on up. If that's, well, I don't know. I don't know what your question is, so I don't know if it's with the land use or not. So,
Well, I'm actually...
if you'll state your name and address for the record,
My
please.
name is Laura Tuminello, and I live at 12235 West Donaldson. And at first, I was a little apprehensive with the fire station, but I have to say y'all done an outstanding job with the plans and everything, making it look like matching with the residential area. Very pleased with that. My question is just with the widening. Is the road going to be widened right there up to the subdivision? Is that why the street is marked? Or there's been a lot of markings on the roadway up there up until the entrance of Dawson Landing. I didn't know if that was going to be scheduled to be widened right there, or if it's...
Okay. Mrs. Duran, I'm going to let you answer that one. I think some of that's utilities being marked, right?
It's just
Utility location, but there will be some road improvements on that corner where the fire station is. Am I correct?
There will be an apron that comes out on Donaldson, and there will be a merge lane on Airline Road to get the fire truck over and into the site.
Okay.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right. Anyone else here to speak on any particular topic on that? Remember, again, the public hearing will come for if you're here to speak or talk about something else, okay? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to communications from the mayor. Sheriff's Department's report. You walked in just in time.
How y'all tonight? I've got your month's totals for you today. You've got 31 grand total incidents that happened in Arlington through the month of August. Still seeing a lot of theft from motor vehicles. Still seeing that the vehicle doors are being left unlocked. I think you and I talked about that the other day. We've got somebody running around out here. We're calling him the Pro because he's just walks around and that's what he does. He just grabs a hold of the door handles and pulls them, and if they open, he goes in there and gets whatever's in there, and if they're not, he just moves on to the next one. So you guys had 14 thefts from motor vehicles, and all of them, their doors were left unlocked. So that's almost half of your crime in your city for the whole month.
Is that mic on, because I can't hear?
Yes, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you're not loud back here. Not loud enough. Sorry.
You may just have to lean a little closer in, I'm sorry.
Okay. I was saying that
Closer to you.
you guys had 31 total crimes for the month, 14 of which were theft from motor vehicles, where your vehicle doors are being left unlocked, and we've got a person that's not just this neighborhood, but several others, is going around, and we're literally calling him the pro, because he walks in the neighborhoods with his head and face wrapped with a hoodie, and he just pulling door handles, and the doors that are unlocked, he goes in and gets whatever he can find in there, and if it's locked, he just goes on to the next one. And I'm saying that 14 out of 31 total crimes in Arlington was from these type thefts. I came to a meeting the other night and we were talking about it, and so it would just help us if you guys would just lock your doors and pay a little bit closer attention, because we've seen him on video numerous times, and we actually see people driving by him. He's standing on a corner, and he's dressed in all black with a hoodie on when it's 100 degrees outside with something covering his face. You know, if you guys would get just a little bit involved and call us, maybe we can put hands on him, and that would knock the crime down in your city almost half. The only other things that I've seen are just, basic domestic violence type things, that there's really not anything that you can control on those types of crimes. I'm seeing one aggravated assault, one drug charge, just one of all these other charges. But then when I see 14 from those, that tells me that's where your problem is. So if you guys will be a little bit more vigilant about locking those car doors, or calling us if you see something suspicious. We're minutes away from you, so we don't mind calling. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions on the Sheriff's Department report? Mrs. Pardue?
We talked about the recent threat at the school. You might want to offer some insight as to what you guys will be doing tomorrow to ensure safety for the students.
Tomorrow, I'm sure that you're all aware of a threat that was written on the bathroom wall. And I'm certain to you all, and to us too, we take everything that we see like that seriously, but we have looked into that. It's not a credible threat. It was two young ladies that were fighting with one another. However, we've assigned an extra officer to the school for that date, and we're going to have numerous other units that are going to be pulling in and out of the parking lot and walking in through the school all day long, as well as everybody that we have here at the Sheriff's Department, like I said, minutes away. So we're very aware of what's going on, so we're going to have a big presence there.
And I know Ms. Mason's here. I don't know if, is there anything would you like to add, Ms. Mason?
I'd just like to add our 2 security officers that we have at the elementary school. We've reassigned to the high school for tomorrow. They were at the middle school today. And we'll be in addition to our additional officers at Shelby County Sheriff's Office assigned as well.
And those two security officers are the retired deputies from that school for years, so, yes, okay. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Anybody else? Thank you. Next up, Chief McMillan, Fire Department report. Thank you.
Mayor and Board, thank you. For the month of August, the Fire Department report is as follows. We had a total of 72 responses, brings us to 647 for the year. 41 were EMS responses, 31 fire responses. We gave mutual aid 13 times, received mutual aid 9. Calls that are south of I-40, 11. Calls on I-40, 10. Other calls, 1. We had 2 members who completed Swiftwater technician training. That brings us to a total of 5 for the department. 3 members are deployed for Hurricane Dorian, and 3 members traveled to Wisconsin to do the final inspection on Truck 71. That's the report.
Thank you. When do we expect the truck to be here and loaded and ready to go?
We expect it to be here within 30 days. It'll have to go to GNW to get tools mounted. They'll do all the mounting, professional mounting on the boards and everything for our different tools. So 60 days, maybe 30, 45 days.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for Chief McMillan? All right. Thank you, Chief. Let's see. I guess next up is me. I have a few. Well, let's see. I'm going to, Mrs. Howe, would you like to give a Chamber of Commerce a couple events you got coming up?
Yeah, 2 events. Saturday is the Arlington 5K. If you're not familiar with that, the proceeds from the race benefit the Arlington Education Foundation, which goes right to Arlington Community Schools. So it's a great way to get up and get a good start to your Saturday and contribute to the schools. And you can check out the Chamber's website for registration forms. You can either register online or print the form out. I will tell you that Thursday 3 to 6 and Friday 8 to 11, I have early T-shirt pickup at the Chamber office, so you can avoid the registration line on Saturday morning. And then the other event is next Wednesday's luncheon, is the 11th of September, and we'll be meeting at 11:30 for our regular monthly luncheon.
Thank you, Mrs. Howe. So, everybody, I haven't been preparing for a run, but I guess we got to run. So.
Walkers are encouraged also.
Okay. Well, I bought new shoes. I bought new shoes, but they already gave me blisters, so we'll wait till. All right. I just have a few things. So, kind of back to where Chief McMillan was on the fire and the questions about the fire station. We're trying to get together. We're just not sure on the time yet. Mrs. Durant's working on it. Chief Harville's out of town. A groundbreaking, I guess you would say, on the fire station. We're not sure on the date yet. We're trying to coordinate that. And also a ribbon cutting, which will go through, probably Mrs. Howe usually handles through hers, but we're not sure on the date on that for the tennis courts because as they're finishing up with times. But those should be getting some information out here days or in the next week or so, I would think, depending on the status of them. Just so the board knows, I spoke with Baptist Hospital this last week, and there was a deadline of I think the 26th or 28th that the appeal from the other hospitals was going to be able to go through, and if they didn't appeal by that time, then basically everything was set. Of course, they expected an appeal. An appeal came again from the competitive hospitals, so now there's a 45 to 60-day wait to go through Chancery Court to file their motions, and then there's another 45 to 60 days. So now you're looking at December, but supposedly this is the last stop for it, from my understanding. And I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but they feel good about it because it wasn't really heard on the state level. So it's kind of like the appeal wasn't heard on the state level, so they didn't feel that there was merit to it. So it's going to the higher court. They may or may not hear it. They may or may not go through court on it. But I just kind of wanted to give we're still, every time we think we're right there at that end date, we have another, that certificate of need process has taken several years, and we're almost there. So I want to give everybody an update on that. And I think that's all I have. Of course, I think everybody in this room probably knows there's an election going on right now. So we have, everybody's ready to see these signs go away, I'm sure, huh? Election. So early voting still going on through September 14th and Election Day the 19th. So that's all I have. Committee reports. I know Mrs. Pardue has one recommendation.
Health and Safety Committee met last month, and we have a vacancy on the committee, and so I have put an application and resume for each of your review. And we would like to recommend Stephen Fort to replace Blake Moyer on the Health and Safety Committee. Stephen has 30-plus years of fire and EMS experience and 21 years as an educator, and he currently works in the Emergency Preparedness Department of the Shelby County Health Department. So he brings wisdom and experience that we don't currently have on the committee, and so we would like to recommend your approval.
I strongly recommend Mr. Fort. So, all right. So, Mr. Fort, will we fill that vacancy? Any other committee reports? Miss.
Why don't you let Tanya say something about the barbecue, because it's not that far away.
Did you want to mention the barbecue too, Mrs. Howe? I see.
And Brian Thompson is here and could speak to it.
All right, Miss. You don't even have to come to the podium. If you just want to stand up and mention something real fast.
There's not much to say. It's the same as usual, same location, October 18th to 19th, and we're just about already filled up on teams. And Tanya, as usual, helps with sponsorships. And
If you're interested in sponsoring, call me at the chamber office.
exactly. So other than that, same as it's been for 15 years that I've been doing it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other announcements? Committee reports? On to old business. Oh, treasurer's report, sorry. Mr. Brooks.
All right, in our general fund, we had a beginning balance of $1,156,737.33, an ending balance of $451,450.68. Our sewer fund, beginning balance of $1,908,823.52, and an ending balance of $2,029,152.70.
You heard the treasurer's report. Any questions on it? All right, on to old business. This is item A, second and final reading of ordinance 2019-08 to amend and readopt the Town of Arlington Future Land Use Development Plan, including maps and pages therein. Mrs. Reed, are we starting out with you? Correct. You and Mr. Baker.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay.
I'll learn.
So given that we've done this presentation a couple times, but given that we have a public hearing tonight and people here wanted to go through it again, so I apologize if you've heard some of these things or seen these slides. So what we're looking at tonight is our future land development plan. The town's required by the state of Tennessee to have a comprehensive plan, and this is a long-range plan that is intended to guide our growth and our decision-making, both in our own investment and in looking at private investment, any requests. Our current plan was originally adopted in '96, was amended a few years later in 2010. These long-range plans have a 20-year plan horizon on them, so they're looking 20 years into the future. We're almost halfway through it now, so because of that, we're doing a quick check on it, making sure we're still on track. We've seen a lot of growth. We've had infrastructure improvements. We've met some of our goals that we had in the plan that were originally placed back in 2010. So we started looking at this last summer. It was put in the budget last summer to do this review. We worked, put out an RFP, hired Fisher Arnold in January as a consulting firm, outside firm to come in and help us with this. Later on in May, we had a subcommittee appointed of residents and members of several of our bodies, Planning Commission, DRC, Ms. Howell from the Chamber, that met every other week for a few months, going through this, looking through the draft, looking through the map, and giving us edits. So it's been a long process coming to this point. We did look at it. We had a public meeting and a meeting in front of the Planning Commission last month, as well as a first reading with the board. And I did want to clarify one thing, because I've seen there's been some misunderstanding. This is our future land development map. It is not a zoning map. Our zoning map is the map that's in place currently that says what can be done on each piece of property. If we are looking at changing that zoning map, we look to this long-range plan to see if it meets our long-range goals for the town. So if something is currently zoned one type of commercial and we're looking at should it be another, we're going to look and see, does that make sense? Is that going to meet our goals? So the zoning map is a tool that implements this long-range plan, but it's not going to mirror it exactly. So just to clarify, because I have seen several people that are confused, this does not change what you can do on your property right now. It just changes what the town's looking at when we move forward. It tells us where we think we might need infrastructure, where we think we might need parks to serve that, things like that. So with that, I'll turn it over to David here for a second to sort of take us through the beginning of what we did to get to where we are tonight. So.
Thank you, Angela. Again, my name is David Baker. I work with Fisher Arnold, and we appreciate the opportunity to work with the town on updating this map. Can everyone hear me on this?
Yeah, just be sure to speak to the mic.
Okay, thank you.
It's on.
It's on. It's not working. Okay. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our steering committee that worked with us countless hours on this, Alderman Brooks and Ms. Howell with the Chamber, also members of the Design Review Commission, Josh Group, and a couple of members of the Planning Commission, Brian Thompson and Russ Campbell. We appreciate all the input they had. I think it was a very diverse group. It brought a lot of good points and a lot of different perspectives, especially from Design Review, Planning Commission, and things that are seen on a monthly basis to those two committees. In the process of developing this comprehensive plan update, we collected all the current data, looked at all the new parcel lines, property lines that have been created since the adoption of this last plan, just so we can have an accurate representation where all the lots are with new roads, streets, and things like that. We also updated the town maps. How does the floodplain, did they change? How will that impact future development? Looked at open spaces, the current areas that the town has they utilize for green spaces, parks, city, and other public facilities. There again, public facilities, wastewater treatment plant, public works buildings, things, entities, and parcels that are owned by the town.
Mr. Baker, can you speak? I see people shaking their head. I think they're having trouble hearing. So if you want to take the microphone up.
If you want to hold it.
Okay. Is that better? Is that better?
Hello, hello. Try this one.
Is that better? Oh, yeah, that's a lot better. Okay, good. Thank you. Let's try it. How about that? Nope. Okay.
It's the length of the microphone.
Okay.
So.
No, I don't know how I did that either. As I mentioned, you updated all the town maps that reflected floodplains, public spaces, public utilities, and things like that. Looked at the census data, looked at a lot of the growth that has happened since the 2000 census, and looked at how the demographics broke out. And one of the things that we were interested in when we started doing the analysis is looking at the age group and how the town has grown and what the change in population has happened since the last census. And this could be utilized by the leadership, by town administration to plan for the future. You know, what age groups do we need to plan for parks and schools, and what other type of recreational or emergency services will be needed based on the age groups that have shown moving into the town. Again, the census looked at occupations, people's careers. Updated the new developments that looked at all the growth that has happened in Depot Square, as well as the eastern portions of the town, all the residential growth, and assessed the patterns of development. Where's the residential going, where are the commercial areas, and things like that. Also, in looking at the plan, this is kind of, we want to do a checkup to see where we were based on the 2010 adopted plan. There have been numerous accomplishments. One recommendation was to develop and adopt an overall Greenway master plan. That has been accomplished. Adoption of the Depot Square master plan, that has been adopted and being implemented. From the planning side, develop a traditional neighborhood development ordinance, that has been done. An expansion of the parks and recreation system, establish a municipal school system. Also, completion of Milton Wilson Road, converted 5 lift stations to make them gravity, so that saves the town revenue to maintain and upkeep of these lift stations. And built a public works building. Comparison to the existing land use to see what existing land uses we have. Are we saturated in some areas, or we need some areas for growth in the current and future land use? And based on that, we came up with several different options where we looked at creating massing a couple areas for potential employment centers, maybe the reduction of some mixed use areas. And after coming up with those options, we came up and settled on a recommendation that we brought back before the committee and vetted it on numerous occasions. And looking at some of the changes and some of the differences in the future land use over the current land use plan, one of the things that we looked at is increased our institutional land use in this area. This for where the veterans home is proposed. Also, that would allow us some room for growth for any school expansion to serve a lot of the residential in the northern portion of the town of Arlington. Also, on the eastern side, as we mentioned, a lot of the development that has happened, this was previously all a mixed use, the White Oak development, and we modified that land use to reflect the things that are currently being developed and built in that area. And then the other area that we looked at doing some modification was on the western portion, kind of around Lamb Road, where we expanded some of the commercial, made neighborhood commercial. Any other modifications that I missed? Right here. Oh, okay. Yes, the other, Dr. Logan, we looked at, since all of Airline Road seems to be developing commercial, made that, recommend that as a commercial use for future land use. The major changes happened or are being proposed south of Interstate 40. In looking at some of the infrastructure that has been put in, installed by the town, if you'll look off around Chester, north of Donaldson Farms Parkway, there's a sewer line being extended. We felt like that will be the next area of growth for residential, in that state lots are typically not served by sanitary sewer, and the town made that investment and recouped some of their investment by the sewer fees and the promotion of smaller scale development, smaller lot development instead of estate lots to handle that infrastructure cost. Also, in looking at some of the interchanges, we felt like this would be an excellent opportunity to create an employment corridor. Look at some light industrial that could capitalize off the intersection of two major interstates. I felt like the location of it would not be detrimental to any existing subdivisions. And then the placement of it, location of the existing Clear Creek would provide us a natural buffer between adjacent land uses and be able to nestle it in between the creek and the interstates. Additionally, the current land use plan along 64 and 385, we felt like, especially the way the retail markets are changing, everyone's shopping online or doing a lot more online. We felt like reducing this would fit better with the overall development patterns, but also had added a mixed use as we transition from this commercial node further north. Some of the other changes, we wanted to provide some neighborhood commercial to support future growth in these areas, as well as designated some areas that we think community parks could go, and that as things start to develop, the town could look in these areas for property acquisition. And if you'll notice, this is along the creek and secondary creek, so that could tie into a future overall greenway system to help connect to what has been proposed on the north side of 40. Any other things that I may have missed? At our last meeting, first reading, we had this area designated as the yellow. One of the recommendations by this board was, since it was already an existing estate type lot, let's just leave it as estate. One of the other recommendations in the White Oak, we had this listed all as mixed use. But really, in reality, only a small portion of it is going to be neighborhood commercial office, and the rest of it is really not developable, and so it's going to be utilized as green space and open space. So those are a couple of things that were brought up at our last meeting to make the adjustments to the maps, and we did that with our latest revision. This is just a comparison of side by side what is existing and what is proposed or recommending for approval. If you'll look, there's a lot of residential proposed in these areas south of Donaldson Farm Parkway. That, thank you, is so far away from existing.
Can you show that again? I don't know if everybody saw the red dot. Can you show where that was? Where you?
All this is from the existing land use is higher intensity residential. What we mean by that, it would have to have city services, water, sewer, curb and gutter, and things like that. As I mentioned earlier, the sewer has been extended down this basin to open up this for development. This would have to be sewered, come under Interstate 40, and quite a big interceptor sewer extension to serve those areas. So we didn't feel like that was really feasible as well as realistic within the next 5 to 10 year time frame, which the duration of this plan runs. So that's why we made the recommendations to go with higher density residential here and have our state south of Donaldson Road, just for the simple fact that the town is not providing those type of infrastructure and services at this point. It still gives development the opportunity to do large estate lots if the market so determines. And that's not to say that in these areas, if the market determined and the developer wanted to do a estate lot subdivision, you could do those in the areas we have designated as a higher density residential. And looking, we'll talk on this. Did you have this? Sure. Okay.
Just one thing we did, there was a question last time, and we were saying that you could see when the two maps were side by side, clearly there was more estate, and another thing we had heard was that the mixed use was something that didn't need to be so prevalent through town. So we did add this to the plan since the last time when you saw it. And it did show that we have increased the estate residential from 3.4%, which was on the map that it's currently in place, to 12.7%. So that's gone up quite a bit. That's of our total land use. And we did reduce down the mixed use from almost 10%, that's there at 9.8, down to 3.9. So it's a pretty significant. Those were the two that changed the most throughout the map, but just because those had been questions, we went ahead and did this. You'll find it in the book that compares the land use currently to what's being proposed now. And as David said, a lot of it had to do with once we actually looked at what we could serve, what the town had already spent money on, and we're looking 10 years out, how long it was going to take before we'd be able to serve any of those areas that the current map had as higher density. It's actually a low density residential, but it's so you're talking 2, maybe 2.5 units to the acre, but it still requires sewer, which is going to take a while and a large investment from someone's part to make that happen. So we felt like this was more realistic and is actually making use of the investment that the town made 10, 15 years ago when we put that sewer interceptor under I-40 there behind the visitor center. That's it's been there in place for a while. This is just taking advantage of that. So wanted to highlight that.
As we looked at the next 5 to 10 years, we wanted to develop some goals or highlight some of the goals that were existing but hadn't fully accomplished yet. One of the things that we met and the committee recommended is to clarify the mixed-use development goal or ordinance and develop the ordinance language to incorporate into the zoning ordinance. That was to clearly define what the planning staff and what the town want to define mixed use as of, how much commercial, office, recreational, and residential components. So was brought before the Planning Commission as well. Just like we had developed the Parks and Greenway Master Plan for north of I-40, we see south of I-40 is the main area for future development. So I think it'd be prudent to develop a Parks and Greenway Master Plan to be on the forefront of development and not reacting to it, and plan for where we think greenways should connect, areas where parks could go to serve future development. A lot of communities are also looking at special area plans. This, we think, would take from what we're looking at as a overall 30,000 foot level and zoom in and just really zoom in on certain key areas that could be gateways into the town. But we think 64 and Airline Road, I think, is going to be a key intersection to start looking at. 269, 385 in that area. That's your main gateway coming from the south, and how do we want to handle that commercial and mixed-use type development in that area? 40 and I-269, excellent opportunity for employment centers, whether that's regional commercial or industrial distribution or a corporate office. It's an excellent node located on two major interstates. So I think that would be something we need to look at in a little bit more detail in the future to get more design guidelines, look at infrastructure, things like that, zero in on these areas. Also, update the utility and infrastructure plan to reflect if this plan is adopted so that the capital improvement projects could be made to further the growth and orderly growth that this plan calls for. In looking at all our analysis and all the studies for this wasn't just something we threw on paper and said, oh, yeah, that looks good. We did a lot of analysis and a lot of basis for this recommendation. One, we did an analysis of the growth patterns. We see where all the majority of the residential is going, where people are living, where commercial is starting to develop, and we analyzed that trend. We wanted to also look and promote areas of development where the town can sustain it. A smart growth. We don't really want to have to extend a sewer line, a mile and a half, 2 miles out when you have an existing sewer line in this area that could serve and promote the development in that basin. And felt like we needed to create employment centers as the community continues to grow, has more residential. There's going to be a need for more people that wants to work where they live. And so I think by creating these employment centers, especially around the 40, 269, 385 corridor, made a lot of sense. And that feels like that's part of our basis for that. With growth comes the need for growth in institutional areas, whether we want housing for the veterans or we need additional land to expand schools, things like that. We analyzed that and feel like that we made a logical decision on where to expand our institutional uses. Also, in looking at our mixed-use classification areas, if you'll notice, so we'll go back to the comparison, all these dark lines, or dark blobs, or mixed use. Quite a bit of acreage of mixed use, and as Angela pointed out, we reduced that. But you can see we've just concentrated it to key certain areas so not to have an overabundance in our mixed use areas, land uses. Having said that, I'll be glad to answer any questions. If not, Angela can help me out with those too.
Well, we haven't got a motion on the floor yet. Are you through it, Ms. Reeder? Are you concluding your presentation also before we get a motion, or?
I can conclude it now. I did hand out some other items for you earlier at the beginning of the meeting, that's some alternatives. So what we have here and the changes that we made.
Why don't we, I know we usually get a motion in a second and then we go into the public hearing. Why don't we get a motion in a second, and then that way we get a couple of things out on the floor, and then we can have some little discussion before the public hearing. Is that okay with everybody, or is that? Because I know I know you handed out a few things, so that way, in case somebody has a question, we're at least on the record with it.
I just want to make sure you knew.
Okay.
We made the changes that it seemed like it was a consensus at last time, but I know there are some other concerns, so we're prepared for that.
All right, so do I have a motion to approve
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Brooks. Do I have a second by Mrs. Pardue? All right, so we'll have some general discussion. If you don't get comfortable. No, so no, I thought you were about to show the change or something. All right, so thank you for explaining that, because I know this has been a long process. Some are asking if they thought it was just popping up here, and I'm not trying to get political. At election time, that's not the reason it's here. This actually started, I think, well, it was in the budget the last 2 years, I think, but it actually started with the development we had, I think, Myers Park, about mixed use, when we found out we had some loopholes in our mixed use policy. So at the request of numerous people up here, several up here, that's been the question ongoing: when are we going to see something on mixed use? When are we going to see something on mixed use? Well, mixed use is tied into our land use plan. So I'm just trying to provide some more history for the people that are here, because usually for those of y'all who are here tonight, we usually have 6 to 8 people in the crowd, and so we know that there's something that everybody's here for tonight. So we're trying to make sure we get the information out. So that I do have, I just want to make sure that, and we'll get into it in the discussion either before or after, but I feel like I usually don't get into something, but I want to recall something that's happened a couple years ago when we had something similar with some rezone. I know probably by show of hands, most of these people live south of 40. Who all live south of 40? Yeah, so 2017, we had a subdivision over there that was rezone, or a question to rezone, and people, I think a lot of these people in this room showed up, and we had that discussion on was there going to be an area rezoned, and that project was either shot down or pulled by the applicant.
It was pulled by the applicant after conversation.
So
Was that at the planning commission?
no, it was
Yes, it was.
Is it at the planning commission level? Yeah, that's right. We were here. Okay. So, but with that, knowing that this last a week and a half ago when we had our special meeting, for those of y'all here, this plan, as you heard all the background that went into it, it was something that this board has been asking and requesting and trying to get through, and we all thought it was a good plan last week or a week and a half ago, pending some changes that we all, we voted on, and that's what we do. We vote on the first reading, then you have time between the first reading and the second reading to contact staff to get discussion in and make any changes. So tonight, we're actually seeing some of those changes. There's actually been some other changes that have been asked, and there still can be changes tonight, is what we're saying. So the reason I'm saying that is because at the last meeting, this last week has been, the last 4 or 5 days, there's been some bad information getting out there. I don't know how it all got out there. But it's been really bad, and it got kind of volatile. Now, I live in that area where most of you all live, and I've talked with some of y'all, and some of the information, I'm not saying it's anybody on this board, it's just information with social media gets out and gets bad and gets volatile fast. So what I'm trying to say is before, by actually 1 or 2 people in this room on social media before, I've been accused of protecting this area too much. There was 2 developments that were shot down. I hate to bring you into it, Mr. McKee. I've seen it a couple times where it says the only 2 developments that have been shot down in the last couple of years has been behind the mayor and the vice mayor's house.
I've got one coming.
I know. You got one coming now. You got one coming.
And I voted for it.
But I know. And so did I. But I'm just saying, so I remember at the last meeting when we were making some of the questions, I said, hey, I don't want to seem like I'm too protective of this area, but I asked about an area that you did bring an alternate proposal to. And I wanted to see where everybody was. Well, it got a little, I think some of the information is bad. So that's what I hope tonight, for all of you, that everything gets cleared. I hope when you come up for your public hearing, you ask your questions, we answer them as a board, staff's here to answer. I just hope everybody leaves with a clear understanding of what the land use plan is versus zoning, what the goals, not necessarily goals, but goals and or obligations of the town. And I just hope that's all I've ever asked from those that I talked to that were upset this week, those that had questions. I just said, if you'll just listen and let us explain it, then maybe everybody have a better understanding. But it got the wrong way first, and then it's trying to clean up. So that's the goal I wanted to try to get to before the public hearing. I felt like I needed to say that before the public hearing because I don't want to look like I'm being reactionary to anything. So that was my first time I've really stepped out and done that. So with that being said, anybody want to say anything before we get to the public hearing, or do you have this alternate?
I do, and I don't know if you want to consider it now,
Well, I guess,
can.
well, we don't have to consider it, but it may show a
Sure.
little more of, did anybody, was this the only one that you had an alternate to?
There's just those three. The other are
If you'll
text.
show the alternates just to give anybody
Sure.
before they come up, that way we could try to either
Absolutely. So, and then
preclude
let
some
me,
questions or something along that line.
just to clarify, because if this is an area of concern, so like I said, the map on the left is existing. This is what's on the books right now. It's been on the books for 10 years or so. And you'll see the change we made is this little yellow section here, which, to clarify on the map, green is estate residential. That's 1 acre lots. That's the density, 1 unit per acre. If you don't have septic, or if you don't have sewer, excuse me, I'm trying not to confuse this, you have to be larger, but the density allowed is 1 per acre. The yellow is a low-intensity residential, so that's what we see in several of our neighborhoods. So that's your, that's like I said before, your 2, maybe up to 2.5 units an acre. The orange, which you see on the existing map, is your medium density, so slightly more than that. So since that was there already, what we did to make use of that was, this is one piece of property. Instead of dividing that one piece of property, knowing that somebody coming in would probably do a PD where they would have to consider adjacent uses, we went ahead and changed it so it was all consistent there. So that is one change, and I did get a question about that. The other, like I said, was basically to flip these, because this area isn't going to be able to develop this way because it doesn't have sewer. So after the last meeting, I did get some questions. We looked at, and I'll let this, we do have the sewer plan. Again, I'll just show the area in green. I don't know if you can orient yourself. This is 40 and 385. This area in gray is the area that we can sewer right now. Everything else is going to take that interchange going underneath 40. So again, just to reiterate, because that's where we can serve, everything else is going to take a large investment. That's why you see us changing.
So, just for clarification, the purple lines are sewer extension, proposed sewer extension.
Yes.
It's not, I want to make sure everybody knew it wasn't a creek or something along
And
that
if you
line.
want more than that, then I'll pass it to the engineer.
Okay.
So one thing that we looked at as an option, because I did get a couple people since the last meeting ask questions or concerns, was instead to, to divide and use Chester as a dividing line and keep the medium density around the existing medium and high density residential that's there, and instead keep the low intensity on the east side of Chester. So changing that, which is currently medium density in our land use, but instead changing that whole area and using Chester as sort of a dividing to keep it all right here next to our interchange. So that's one option that I put together and put in front of you that we might consider tonight. And just quickly, another thing that was brought up that I heard was the concern about the area between the two, now that we've got estate here and estate to the north. So you have some language in front of you for consideration that would state that while this is low intensity, perhaps it makes more sense for this to be closer to a half-acre lot density instead. So everywhere else, our low intensity allows an RS-18 or 22, but given the range between these two estate areas that we're sandwiching in, let's try to make sure this develops in an area that's the lowest density that we have before estate. So there's some language on the handout you have there, and I emailed to show how that's something we could add in if that is a concern of more of the board. And then lastly, the other thing that I heard was some concerns from a few people about this area up here. This is, if you're not familiar, so there's 385, that's our wastewater treatment plant there, the railroad, it's at the end of Lamb Road there. It's got a floodplain on a lot of it, not the most easiest to develop, but we had that as a multifamily. What I've got in front of you is some language saying that while we don't think detached single-family homes necessarily make sense there, we feel like it's more appropriate for something like a townhome, something like that, that type of intensity of multifamily. So those were just three options. The stuff we put in the in the booklet that you have in front of you, had a pretty good consensus. These were things that I heard from a few members, but not a majority, so that's why I wanted to present those.
And for clarity on that one, that map right there, so
Yes.
the green estate, let's just, off Chester, that's kind of isolated there.
This is the existing neighborhood.
That was yellow, actually, on the previous map that Mr. Biggs pointed out, and since we had a state there, it needed to be shown as a state.
It was, yes,
And
we
it was
changed that.
orange above there on the east side of Chester, and that was, so that's the two proposed changes on that one.
Correct. So the
Okay.
one you have in front of you has, gosh, put them too far apart.
I know there's several maps, I'm just trying to
Yeah.
make sure for everybody's.
Has the green, and then, like I said, this area east of Chester, we're proposing, if there's a concern about that density, that it would make the most sense to control it in one area. We have existing medium and existing high-density residential there, services are there, so actually keeping those like uses together, if we didn't want to use it as a buffer along I-40, so.
But again, on the proposed map from the last one, at our last meeting that we voted, it was actually showing there was no estate right there, right?
This was yellow
That
as
was
well,
yellow.
yes,
Okay,
sir.
that's what I was just making sure.
Yep, that is
clear
a
on
different-
changes. Okay. All right, so do y'all want to get into the public hearing, or do y'all want to have some discussion before then? It's up to you. Public hearing? Okay, so by show of hands, so we can kind of figure this out, how many people, I mean, if you change your mind, you can speak, but how many people are wanting to speak on, not a one? Oh, okay. So, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, 6.
Sure.
All right, so we've got roughly 6 people, so I'll give you 3 minutes each. Come on up and talk, and if somebody else decides they want to, you raise your hand, we'll go with that. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I thought we already had a motion.
Not for a public
A motion
hearing.
for the public hearing, I'm sorry. Yeah. Do I have a motion to close the meeting and open the public hearing?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. McKee, second by Mr. Brooks. We are now in the public hearing. This was published and advertised, and so if anyone that wants to come speak on this particular topic only, that's what the public hearing is for, is this topic. I ask you to come forward, state your name and address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes. Yes, sir.
I'm not going to take 3 minutes. I just wanted
If you'll state your name and address, please.
to, Michael Darden, 4915 Chester Street. I live across the street from some of that property y'all want to rezone. I personally think you ought to leave them as estate lots, the whole block down through there, until y'all straighten out Chester Street and widen the road, and then worry about building some houses and running a sewer in there. The road's dangerous enough as it is. We got people coming by from Fayette County all day, in and out, and the road, and you live around the corner, you know how much traffic comes down through there. And I just don't think it's a good idea to do that until you do some improvements out here.
Sorry. Please, if you have anything to say, come. I'm not sure. I'm saying if anybody has anything to say, please come up and state your name and address for the record. Who wants to be next? I saw hands. Where are the hands?
I don't want to be next because.
Well, you're next.
All right, my name is Kayla Griffin, and I probably don't need the mic because I enunciate and project. My address is 5567 Southern Winds Drive, but also in Chester and Pinkley and sparkled other places. So I'm with the gentleman here that feels that Chester is a nightmare road. We've got the underpass at I-40 that can't handle more traffic. It's already a nightmare. I personally feel too, it needs to stay a state. I am very thankful that you guys did the job that you did and that you have taken all of that into assessment. I do feel the orange was a revenue aspect on sewer, and that was the greatest concern. And that was why orange was probably proposed. And so I'm looking at less on how are we going to generate, and I don't know, you said sewer was $2 million. How are we going to, go on sewer, whatever the sewer was. What was the $2 million sewer? When you guys said sewer
there's been
1
way
million
more than
last
2 million.
time and then
No.
2 million?
It's more.
I think.
Was that the budget? Yeah. Okay. In the beginning, at the beginning. All right, so here's all that I have to say is whenever you look at why I think most people came to Arlington, they came for the rural town. I've been here since '91 and, long roots here. I work for a local town, company here. And they come because it's rural. They don't come for orange. They come because they can get yellow, but green is what everybody is wanting, and that's because they want that rural estate lot. And I honestly believe we have an opportunity to make Arlington unique, and that we're a city that fosters to that and preserves that and takes care of that. And not many other cities can claim that. Franklin and a few other cities can, but Arlington would be good to put us up there and try to see that we could do that too. So I appreciate y'all's time. I don't know that I'm going to be able to sway an opinion or a vote. I feel like I did a little bit because we did get a yellow back out. So that was better than orange. I'm not a UT fan, but the orange flipped me out like anything whenever I saw it. And I did see current, and so Brian Thompson, I did see current versus 2010 proposed versus the 2019 proposed. The trend has continued to get smaller lots. And I lived through Bartlett doing that. And I was long time Bartlett and long time with all the mayors and friends there. They continue to do smaller. I'm seeing Arlington head in that, and I think we can do better. So.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin. Who's next?
I don't know what's going to come out, but my name is Laura Tuminello, and I live at 12235 West Donaldson. And I'm here, I'd really like to see that green put back on that map. Those people that invested in that area, invested in a lifestyle, not just in land, and changing their zoning with established homes already just doesn't make sense to me. I know that's not changing the zoning, it's changing it, looking at it in the future. It's a wish list, but it changes the lifestyle of what they're permitted to do on their land. And when they searched out estate lots, they're searching out that lifestyle. So I like that you're preserving what is already there, and on the bottom where you're not, you change some of that intensity to preserve some of that area too as a buffer. But what I would really like to request is, we do have some estate area here, and I would like to see some provisions put in place that are going to protect the current residential estate lots. I hear time and time again how estate zoning is just a holding place. And we know that's true. When we're like selling this green down here, like that's going to really stay. That's not staying like that. That's just because we don't know what else to do with it yet because it doesn't have sewer yet. I would like some areas that is designated for real estate areas and to protect it, not just a holding area. And also have one more piece of along Donaldson. All of those lots, I love that the green is below us and around us, and nothing's really going to happen with that for a while, but that block of yellow, those are all estate lots. They're all established state lots, with the exception of the one on the far left. For everybody in the audience, the little red star there with the pink and the yellow, that's going to be the fire station, and along there, those are all estate lots. They're all established homes. With the exception of the one on the far left, and it's an empty lot. And it has 15 acres on it. So a developer wants to come in and develop that, which is understandable. It would be nice to have homes back there. But if you kept it all estate, they could still come in and develop into 1 acre lots. And that would be perfectly suitable for that area. But to do low intensity on that 115 acres, it completely changes the lifestyle of everyone around, especially my lot. I have a nice lake in the back, there's trees, we fish, there's deer, everything. That comes in and develop, and sewer is already across the street. So the chances of that happening and a lot of houses going right next to me are very highly probable because the sewer is right there. You see the subdivision across the street. So that's the one thing that a little selfish request is, it does affect all of the estates if that does change. And also with the fire station being right there, West Donaldson is another very dangerous road. So with the fire station being there, you don't want a lot of extra traffic with houses on there either. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tomino. Who's up next? Okay, there we go.
My name is Jeff Harris, and I live at 12700 Rolling Lake Drive. The difference between the two maps, the proposed with the yellow, the concern that I have with that is if you have the ability to have this as a low-intensity zoned area, there's not a developer in the world that would not, with our high property values in Arlington, that would not jump on the opportunity to develop that area, you know what I mean, as that low, low intensity, so you got more houses in a smaller, in a bigger area, they would jump all over that. Whereas it's been a state so far for so long. I don't see, I understand the sewer is a huge issue there, getting the sewer across the road poses all kinds of obstacles trying to get that there, and I know it's expensive, I know it's costly. I realize the town implemented the huge sewer main right there at the back of the, was it the Misty Trails or that subdivision, with future provisions for that. My concern is the property value of our neighborhood, decreasing with the lower intensity lots being around us. A lot more traffic on Chester Street, like the gentleman mentioned. There's been several accidents on Chester Street. It's a two-lane road, but there's been several accidents. One nearly catastrophic with a gentleman, driving too fast. So there's not a lot of room for error. Got a couple of creeks there, so I think the infrastructure should be improved there. But I really would like to see that the town leave the estate lots as estate, not change them to low intensity, because developers will jump on that opportunity to recoup more money because they have more properties in that smaller area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. I think we had one or two more hands. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm John Thomas. I'm at 4700 Chester. I wasn't going to say anything, but one of the maps showed the proposed sewer lines are going to go across my backyard. So I was wondering who is, on what authority do you guys have the right to come onto my property and dig up my yard and put a sewer line through it? Respectful.
Well, if that's your only question, we'll address the sewer, like how sewer works, not just here, but all over when it comes to that. If that's your only question, I'll make sure that they get to that.
Other than the fact that we bought that Panhandle piece of property as a place to be a country getaway. We're not planning to split that land up, but we are surrounded, or on one side we have that big lot, and we are concerned about having that, houses, big subdivisions, I don't mind 1-2 acre lots next to us, but the half and a third acre lots, that's just going to be a little bit chaos, especially on a very busy street right now. Agreed, it's dangerous. We put some speed bumps there, but that's all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Yes, sir. Here, come from.
Ken Sanders, live at 5015 Chester Street. And actually, I have a couple questions. Our house is at the dead end of Pinkley, just to kind of orient everyone. And I know in the past there was a section of land that's right at the edge of that yellow. There was proposed development that was voted down last year, I think.
2017.
Okay, we were here for that meeting. So my question is, if this is approved the way it is, and the people who own that development, would they automatically be able to come in now and build on small lots, or would it still have to go and be approved, or does this make it approved now?
No, I'll have staff answer that, so I don't want to take up your time.
Okay.
So you get your, any other things you want to get in there, and then I'll have staff, and then we'll address those questions here in a
No,
minute.
that's mainly, I don't understand if, when they make this change, then does it have to come back before the city for approval on another development later on?
Yeah. We'll get to that. We'll answer your question. Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Is there anybody else that was wanting to speak before we try to address some of these issues? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Monica Lindley, and I live at 4851 Chester. I am the only house on Chester that has sewer. When y'all run the new sewer, how's that going to affect us? That's a good question. Since it cost me $35,000. Second question is, the property across the street from me that's in estate lots, they've been out surveying for weeks now, so somebody else has bought that land. My worry is we just built a very nice house, and for y'all to come in and approve 0 lot line, small houses, if that happens, because I know it was up for grabs last year. My concern is what can be done on that land across. I'm just as concerned as what can be done with the land beside me and around me, because you have an orange. So.
Thank you, Ms. Lindley. Any other questions? Or we'll start answering some of these questions and get into board discussion. Yes, sir, if you'll come forward.
My name is Bill Smith. I live at 12263 Chapel Meadow. I got a few questions here. Can I ask a couple questions before?
You can ask questions, but I mean, you're going to have your 3 minutes, so I'm saying, so that way, to be fair to everybody, if you'll ask your questions, then let us answer them after, if you'll do that.
So the one question I had, listening to everybody else's, was a lot of concern with the bridge there at Chester near I-40. And I think we'd mentioned like the flyover there on Airline as well. If, is that TDOT that would actually do that overpass, that would be responsible for updating that? And would they only do that after they validate the increase in traffic? So it's like, to me, I don't think that they would fix that bridge until the traffic increases. So I don't think we can fix it first and then house second. So I think that's a question to address, to let people know about that. The second question was, I think he had asked as well, is the new plan, if you vote on it and it passes, when will it take effect? Because it was mentioned something about not now, maybe later. The other question was, on the new proposed sections, they increased a lot of housing areas, they said, due to sewer costs. So I'd like to understand what that difference is of return on the sewer value. So if you're increasing the housing to pay back for the sewer, opposing, larger lots, less money, what's that time difference you're looking at? Does that make sense? And of course, will there be an increase in service or in sewer fees for the rest of the city for all this new sewer add-on? And then, of course, now I just went online and the existing plan is what I found online. You said that this proposed alternative, is that available online? Because I haven't seen that one. Where's that at? Is that, because on the main page, the future planning.
New section of the website.
It'll,
where they talk about this.
yeah, it'll. Well, tonight, whatever
so
tonight.
My point is, I was unable to find it, and all I found was this left one. It looks like there's a lot of major changes, mostly below I-40. So I would highly recommend that we put this voting out to a different date to let everybody see the new proposed changes, because it also sounds like there's lots of alternatives, and nobody really knows exactly which one they're going to go with.
Is that all your questions?
That's it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Smith. All right, so that looks like all the hands that were up. Oh, come on. One more.
I'm Jennifer Walls. I live at 5883 Chester Street. Okay, one question I had, I wanted to see the map blown up as the town, the entire town, not just south of I-40 again, because I just wanted to ask, were there any more areas that had that much, any areas that big that were orange or that were the high intensity? So I would like to see that. That area that is orange right there, though it doesn't look that big, looking at it on the whole map, it's approximately 167 acres. give or take. I personally would not like to see it turn into the high-density housing. I think that also could mean that being that close to the interstate and everything, it could end up being apartments, multi-use and that kind of thing. In Arlington, it seems like whenever we let developers come in, and if we go on and zone it this way, they're gonna do it. They're gonna take advantage of it. They come in and they knock every tree down. They flatten it out so they can get as many houses into a small spot that they can get, you know, the most money for the house, which is obviously, that's smart. However, this is our town. I've lived here for, I guess, 25 years now, 26 years, but my family has lived here all their life. Actually, that orange piece right there is my old family's farm. It is the old farm that goes to the house that was at 5883 Chester Street where I live now that was burned down. Aside from that, I've been all over that land. I know exactly what it looks like. I know every hill and every tree. Where the Boogeyman barn is back there, where nobody knows what that is. But anyways, I would just like to see it not high density, not knocked down. And that's one area that is very big and hasn't been touched in Arlington. It's one area that we could develop in such a way where you actually save the landscape of the town, rather than, you know, some of the other farmland, some of it starts out flat and there's no trees on it anyways, so you really can't build it into the landscape. That area is perfect for estate lots, larger lots, and in order to preserve the land for the town as well as the, you know, the character of the town is what I'm trying to say. Preserve the land that has been here forever, that will preserve part of the character of the town, rather than like down Milton Wilson, where they just wanted to put a neighborhood there and they flattened it out and they built their neighborhood. It doesn't preserve the character of the town. That's just my opinion, so I would like to see, that's my opinion of why I don't approve of the bright orange zoning for that area. But, you know, and I'd also like to see, because I just, you know, I do know how big that area is. Are there any other orange areas? I don't see any other really like orange areas that are that big, that are completely orange, completely high density.
Well, that's, again, that's not the maps pro. We'll get to the map, the most recent map. That's not even the most recent one. We'll get to that in just a second.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Walls. So we have one or two more. Come on. Yes, sir. Come on up.
My name is Billy Griffin. I'm at 5567 Southern Winds Drive.
What was that address again?
5567 Southern Winds Drive.
Okay.
So when we buy into Arlington, we expect a certain amount of protection of our properties. We'd like to know that there's not going to be great changes in the properties around us. At least there should be some transition, not some drastic changes. And what I'm seeing, that yellow turning to orange, is estates butting up to some very small lots. And I'd like to know why you think that's a good idea. After all, most of these other changes are not so dramatic. You have yellow against estate, and then you have orange against yellow. But then in this one place, you have orange against estate, and it seems a little dramatic. And I think you'll notice it too, just driving by. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Yes, sir.
Ron Baronato. I'm on 5370 Watkins Glen Circle East in Hall Creek Apartments. But we also have property we just purchased on Pinkley right there. And just ditto what everyone else has already stated. We all, I think, we feel the same way. We bought in that area for that estate lot feel and are investing quite a bit in a preparation before we even build in this area. And we would like to see like-size lots that are going to be built right behind us, you know, at least an acre, one home per acre. I mean, I'd like to see, you know, when I thought of estate lots, I thought a home on 2 acres, which is what we're going to have. So we just want to protect, well, I think what everybody wants to protect is that rural, more, we knew people were going to build behind us when we bought the lot, I mean, but we'd like to see lots at least equal to the size of what we already have to preserve that area and make it nice and not look like that cookie cutter neighborhood you drive into on the west end of Nashville where you see all those homes. Just, it was really nice area, and now it's just cookie cutter homes in there. And I would like when people drive through Arlington, and especially us who are living there, to not have to have the same thing. So we just keep that charm and the area already has and preserve that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bernardo. Yes, sir, Mr. Campbell.
My name's Kenneth Campbell at 4930 Chester. I kind of reiterate what a lot of people have already said. I guess where we are at, we've been there for 31 years. I have personally seen a lot of the traffic incidents in many of the years that we've been there, being at home, being away from home, either hear about it or actually witness some of this. So the congestion that would be put on Chester Drive, I feel that's going to be an issue in itself. I'm not sure what the actual possibilities of sewer coming across. I know we can't stop developers from wanting to build. I just don't, if we have sewer there, how a developer, somebody wouldn't try to petition Arlington to go from what might be good now at a smaller estate to actually cutting it down yet even further and coming in with a lot of small houses. Where we're at, our location, our property's over 800 foot deep, and I have, you know, a lot of property on both sides. And from the previous deal that was going to go on, we were going to have quite a few houses back up to our property just on one side. Revision brought it down to 5, but nonetheless, if there's just an immense amount of houses in there, it's just cramming a lot of people in big areas and just congesting everything a lot worse than what it is. We don't have but Airline Road, Milton Wilson, Highway 70 that are 4-lane. These little small roads just were not meant for a lot of congestion in the traffic. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. All right, last chance. We're going to close the public hearing and move back to the meeting and discussion. Yes, sir. Come forward.
My name's Randy Horde. I live at 4475 Chester. My question is, if, like, I'm sitting on 4 acres, numerous ones of my neighbors are 4 acres. It was estate. Why would you take 4-acre lots that are estates and turn them into low intensity? Why would you do that? That's all I've got.
Okay. All right, do I have a motion to close the public hearing and resume the meeting?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. McKee, second by Mr. Brooks. All right, we are back on the main motion. What we'll try to do is, I don't know if you took notes. I'll hit a couple of these highlights and then basically let staff try to answer as many questions as possible. I think there's, and this is some of the confusion I was talking about over the last week, because I heard that the mayor was putting in, he was rezoning this land to put in 0 lot lines all around his house. And if anybody really believes that, that is absolutely ridiculous. I live there. My parents live right there behind all you guys. My sister, she's back there in the back. She has 2 acres. Some of these people are my neighbors. And if anybody believes that or believes what somebody's selling, then I'm absolutely sorry. When I come home, my wife's crying because of the stuff that was being said the last 4 days. It was tough. So I'm sorry if I've talked to some of y'all, but it hit home pretty hard. Because we've sat here before, and I've said last week at that meeting, I said, I'm not going to make this political, Sometimes sitting in this spot right here, every one of these spots, not just this one, every one of these spots, we have to make decisions based on the town. Doesn't mean that we want to do this, doesn't mean that anybody up here doesn't want to protect this town as much as possible. Sometimes there's different ways or different thought processes, but that's the thought process of everybody up here, and I applaud every one of them for being here and doing it. But the zero lot discussion, I know sometimes the low intensity, I think there's some confusion there. Low intensity is approximately half acre, third acre to half acre, more closer to third acre. We talked about buffer zones, which Ms. Reeder will get to, about when we talk about people. Of course, we keep pointing at that orange. Some of that orange is gone on this other map. I don't know if you can pull that up, Mrs. Reeder. Is it up there? Right. And of course, that's still not approved by the board, but it was one of the changes that was made from last meeting to this meeting. We had talked about, and I'm going to get our engineer here in a second to kind of explain sewer and how sewer is driven by the consumer. When I say that is, I'm on septic, like most of you all here. I don't pay any sewer fees, so I don't know when everybody complains I know when they complain during the summer. When they water their grass, they're paying more in sewer. I'm not paying that, and most of you all here aren't paying it either. So I'm perfectly fine being on septic. I'm telling you that right now. But as an obligation from this, as tax-paying citizens, when you're sitting on this board, and from what a town is responsible for, because I pay property taxes like some of the people, I know some people back there have regular homes in different communities. They pay property taxes, they're paying sewer fees, they're paying for roads, they're paying for infrastructure, they're paying for public safety, all that too. So as a town or community, we have an obligation to provide reasonable services within reason. Now, I think there was confusion. I hope I'm not correcting you, Mr. Baker, but when you said something about the sewer extension, there is no proposed sewer extension at this time. I want to make that clear. Am I correct, Mrs. Reeder or Mr.? There's a design. We have a design. Well, we had it. Yeah, there's nothing. We actually had a design when I came into office, Mr. Haley sat down and said, this is what sewer is going to look like someday all across Arlington, from when it runs underneath by Donaldson Parkway all the way to 64. It's about a $15 million price tag, and that was in 2011. It's more than that now, we know that. And they said it's not going to happen until it's development driven. And there's a huge development there at 385. So what I'm saying is the town, just so everybody is aware, that the town doesn't usually put in the infrastructure like sewer. That's usually driven by when development does come in. So I just want everybody to clear. Just because there's design doesn't mean that we are physically putting anything in right now. That's one of the confusing things, I think. But again, back to the rural part, I'm with you there too. I mean, me personally, I'm there. I moved there I live on 2, they live on 3, she has 2. I have 18 acres that just sold behind me that I don't own, that a former resident of Arlington just sold. So I'm kind of at the same mercy as you are. My parents' property touches up some of these other properties. I wasn't even aware of, until not too long ago, about the way that it was yellow on that L, which is, it's not showing it here, and then orange closer to the interstate. I mean, that's been there since the last land use plan. So that was why at the last meeting I kept questioning it. But again, as a resident or as a resident of that area, I even said at the last meeting, I've got to be careful that I'm not given the perception that I'm being too protective of my area. And I think Mr. Biggs the next day called me and actually said, hey, I agree with you on that yellow. And he said he was going to. So that was part of it. So that's why it's been there's a lot of confusion. Ms. Reeder, can you come up and some of the questions that you were asked? Mm-hmm. And then we can get into Mr. Hill, if you'll kind of explain sewer. So
a few things that I heard that, just to clarify, so the question was, when does this go into effect? Does it automatically approve projects? Can someone come in and start doing something immediately? If it were approved, it does go into effect automatically from the board. But these lots, and then the other comment was made that we have a state zoning that is a holding pattern. And to be honest, a lot of the land south of I-40 is zoned to state right now, but our future land use plan says one day when services are there, we want commercial at the interchange there at 64 and 385. So the estate that is their zoning designation is holding, because while we see that one day happening, we can't serve it right now. So right now, that's what you can do with it. So that's what's meant by the holding. It's the zoning itself, because while we have a long-range vision, we can't serve it currently. It's not the long-range plan, that's the holding pattern. If we were to change this, if the area were to suddenly change to yellow, and someone were interested in doing something, the zoning is currently estate, they would have to come in and request a zoning change. They would have to prove that they could serve it, that they could meet the requirements of this town, and that it was the right time to make that change. So the board, just because it says something, we're not held hard and fast to having to accept any proposal here. We've had other proposals come forward where someone has proposed a certain density. The board just recently, we had one across from the elementary school. This orange designation could have given them certain densities. The board felt that wasn't appropriate at this time, didn't fit the character. We approved a lower intensity use, which means fewer homes per acre. So you're not held to it. This is just one thing that's supposed to guide us. So it would not immediately approve any projects coming in. The person would have to come through, like I said, go through a zoning change. It would be published. It'd be a public hearing. The board would have to consider it. They'd have to go through a development process. Again, we've seen those. It would go through the whole process in front of the board, the planning commission, the DRC, and all of that. So it's not an immediate approval for anything, and it doesn't guarantee those uses for someone. So that was a couple things that I heard that I just want to clear up. Absolutely, these uses, the low intensity and the medium or suburban, do not permit apartments. So I'll just say that. Multifamily, each one of these, if you look through the book itself, there's a list of what's appropriate and how it should look for every one of these categories, has their own page in the plan, and multifamily is not listed on any of those. So that is definitely not something that could come in based on our long-range plan and what we're looking for there. Hold on, let me see if I had a lot of notes. People. As far as the estate next to the orange, we have in the current plan, the whole length of Chester was estate next to orange for the most part, except for that one little L-shaped that buffered on Pinkley. Should have put these maps closer together. Oops. So if you see here, the length of it actually had them across the street from one another. But I see what he's saying about having this change right behind him. That was the one comment I made earlier, is that when we've had alternate uses, so it's all residential, but if you have a large lot, when you have another project come in through that PD process, one thing that the board looks for, the planning commission looks for, is that we're buffering. A lot of times you think of that between like commercial and residential and making sure the commercial doesn't impact the residential use, but it can be between different residential too. So a project with large lots, you might have them put the large lots in that area so that it was a buffer to the existing ones, or you might have them put their open space, their park, their green area, something like that. With the new alternative that we proposed tonight, that goes away and that whole area becomes yellow, so that might be a moot point there, but just to address that. And then just to clarify, low intensity means low density, fewer homes per acre. And we don't try not to look at the lots and the existing patterns, but more in general of what makes sense in the area, what services we have existing, what services we could provide. So there may be some lots in there that are smaller, but there are times when people may want to divide it, may want to put a house on the back for their in-laws or for their mother, something like that. That would be an option, but there's also the option that somebody could have two lots next door to each other and want to do something one day. So we try not to look at each individual lot and see how they would react and how they would subdivide their lot, because there's really no telling. There's too many options for how that could occur. And I think that's, can you think of any other
Well, I
ones?
think there were some sewer questions, and while Mr. Hill comes up, I think Ms. Lindley had a question talking about, because they had to put sewer in.
Correct.
And so she was asking how that would impact her, and I guess, I know she probably,
If you're not doing it anytime soon, I ain't worried about it.
okay, well, yeah, so.
Yeah, and that's an individual situation, but yeah, she did have to, their lot wasn't large enough for a septic. They were lucky enough that while it wasn't inexpensive at all, and I understand that, there was something close enough that they could tie into themselves, so.
And that's because they were under 2 acres?
They were under 2 acres in size. It takes 2 acres from the county health department and the town to have a septic system on your property, so.
True, that we had to write it to the street. So finally, across, we spent $8,000 to run the street.
So.
Yes, ma'am. I'm trying to look at some other questions that were on here. Let's see. There was Mr. Hill. Let's see. There was a couple about sewer cost. Maybe I don't know if Ms. Durant wants to tackle that or if Mr. Hill does. And there was the bridge at I-40. And there was the road. TDOT. That's what I'm saying, the road. Because actually, on a long-term or long-range plan, transportation plan, there's actually, I don't want to get ahead of anything, but there's actually a widening of Chester at some point that's.
Mr. Hill can speak to those.
Yeah. Those are on long-term transportation plans, which the first thing I saw when I said it, I was like, of course, I got the rural feel. I was like, why would we want to widen Chester Road? Because I don't want anything there. But that was the conversation I had with Mr. Durant.
So that issue of the capacity of Chester, you're correct, a 2-lane road is going to be difficult if a lot of development happens.
And
It's going to
expensive.
be a problem. And expensive. What Arlington has done historically is had development build the roads, or we've gotten funding through TDOT to build roads. We're not taxing the citizens and building a lot of roads. So we don't want to get into that situation, I don't think. And but we have you see a dotted line running past Donaldson Elementary School across Airline and continuing east. That was a future plan for a Donaldson Farms Parkway to go all the way to Fayette County potentially, but at least to go to Chester. If that area developed higher density than the state, you would probably need to have that extension of the road to do that. And,
You're talking in between Airline and Chester,
Airline to
where
Chester.
Donaldson Elementary School is, which we've already got the other part working on, but not that part, right?
Right. It'd be east of Airline. And someone mentioned the bridge under I-40, and you're correct, TDOT controls that bridge, and they're not going to widen it for any reason that they would have. If the town wanted it bigger, we'd pay for it. So, and I don't know of any developer that's going to be willing to do that. So there are a lot of obstacles, obviously. On the issue of sewer, this plan, I put this plan together probably 10 years ago, and it's the challenge was if you were going to develop the entire southern part of Arlington on public sewer the way you'd want to do it, not have septic tanks everywhere, not have alternative sewer systems, what would you have to put in? And all these purple lines represent gravity sewer lines starting north of the interstate with a 30-inch pipe, and then it branches off into a bunch of branches that would serve all of South Arlington. Where this line you see here that goes from purple to yellow is the natural ridge line. We have sewer, gravity sewer, within the yellow area. The blue lines are existing sewer lines. Those are purple lines along Hall Creek. You could potentially extend the sewer line and serve parts of those areas. You already have an existing 24-inch sewer line right here that the town paid to put across Interstate 40 in 2002. So that's in place. If you look at what areas of Arlington can be sewered next, that's it. You look north, everything north has sewer. This can be sewered next. Then beyond that, you're going to have to do the 30-inch under the interstate, and the mayor mentioned the $15 million price tag. That was the price tag on all this infrastructure, purple lines, 10 years ago. So it's $20 million, $25 million now. So that's not something, again, the town is going to jump out and do. So.
Talk about the ridge break right there at Dawson. You had one lady talk about
Yeah.
Dawson having sewer, so she thought sewer could jump across that ridge line.
What we have, by virtue of having this plan, when people come to us and say, I want to develop this property right here and I want to pump it over the ridge into that sewer line, we constantly get those requests. And what we say is, I can't let you overload this sewer line with drainage outside that basin. You're going to have to wait until this sewer line is built. And that's the only way we've been able to control development. People want to put pump stations everywhere and pump it over the ridge, but Arlington just got rid of, you see barely see little pink dots on here. The last sewer extension we did got rid of about 7 pump stations that had been allowed to be built over the years. But once you build a pump station, you're going to maintain it from now on, or you're going to lay a big gravity sewer line, which that was a 30-inch line had to be laid around through there to Summers Road. You're going to lay that to take it out of service. So having control of where sewer goes and having control of how it goes is how you make sure you don't have a sprawl situation. You don't have a situation where you lock the taxpayers into paying for infrastructure in 10 years or 15 years that they didn't even know they were going to have to buy. So that's what we're trying to control with all this plan, and what we tell developers. Before you do anything, sewer's got to get to you.
So for clarity on that, just because, all right, so all the purple that's in the purple,
Yes.
that is not even realistic at this point.
No.
For unless just whoever owns all that 1,800 acres decides to come in and pump a lot of money in to put a lot of sewer. So that's kind of out of the, when we talk, whether we talk green, yellow, whatever there, that's even just out of the question for quite some time. So that's what the town is just trying to have the foresight before this plan comes back up. And like you said a week or two ago, when it comes back up in 7 to 9, 10 years again, to consider again. So that's going to be sewer driven there. So the only option or the only opportunity or the only, whatever the word is, I'm not using the right one, the only potential area that sewer can be extended right now is in the yellow on those that purple branch
Purple
right there.
lines right here. That is the last, that's in the Hall Creek Drainage Basin. That's the last area that's not currently sewered beyond just the development you see there. There's another basin over here and then that area there that can be served from existing sewer with a reasonably short extension of sewer lines. So
On the south side.
Yes. So 2 questions. That one was asked by a gentleman here that he owns the property. He was wanting to know how sewer could come through his property. I think that was the question. He owns the property. How does the town get to decide if there's sewer there or not?
public infrastructure can be built under eminent domain where you would condemn a right-of-way. You don't want to do that initially. You would try to negotiate with property owners to acquire an easement to extend sewer lines. But if you can't acquire easement for the entire route, you can go to condemnation where you appraise it, pay the property value, and acquire it in that way. So the town of Arlington has the legal authority to acquire right-of-way and easements where needed for public infrastructure.
Again, it's development driven, and we wouldn't do that.
We wouldn't do that.
Just out of the blue
Yeah.
to extend sewer. Typically, the town does not pay for infrastructure. We don't build infrastructure to invite development. Development has to justify what they want to do according to your current zoning code, zoning ordinance, subdivision regulations, land use plan, and they have to build the infrastructure. The town doesn't expense tax dollars to extend infrastructure to invite development.
Okay. And that same question, what happens to current estate or current landowners that may be on septic when sewer is expanded?
I think they can connect to it.
Is it optional? Is what I'm asking.
I'm not sure I know what the ordinance says about a requirement.
It's optional.
Okay.
If it's running right in front of your house, it's highly encouraged, and most people would want to tap that sewer line. If it stops at Chester Street, and you're talking about how many ever lots are down Pinkley, it's still going to be quite costly to get it from Chester Street all the way down Pinkley to all of the lots back there. So typically, that neighborhood would not choose that, or if they did so choose, they would get together probably and pool monies to be able to extend that sewer into their areas at some point in time. But again, all that's development driven.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see. I think that addressed most of the questions before we'll get into we got the road widening, we got sewer, we got bridge, we got fees. Oh, real quick, Mr. Durant, can you address fees, how sewer fees are paid and how it's consumer driven? Just so, because I think that was one of the last questions that we had.
Currently, the fees are driven by enterprise fund. So sewer is an enterprise fund, it's a business fund, so your taxes don't pay for sewer. It's a accounting rule that says that a utility has to be self-sustaining. So whatever it costs to operate your utility is what you have to turn around and set your rates at to charge your citizens to be able to maintain that system. But again, we don't typically extend sewer and pass that cost on to the consumer. The developer actually pays for the extension of the sewer themselves, and there are sewer development fees that the developer pays in advance that handles what we need to do at the wastewater treatment plant to take care of the capacity of whatever's being developed. So those fees aren't passed on to the existing consumer.
Okay. Thank you. I think I tried to jot down as many notes, and I think I got as much as possible. So I guess what we'll try to do is go kind of like we did last week, start with Mr. Harmon over there, and we'll start moving our way around and go, if everybody wants to, that way, and just kind of I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We try to. Otherwise, it starts a town hall. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Harmon.
Well, over the last few years, this plan right here is going to kind of set the guide for the next 10 years. Looking at it, I see where some of it looks pretty good, but then again, we got areas that I think need protecting. Over the years, every time that we would say we've reduced the lot size over on the north side of the interstate, we always say, but we got the south side where we'll have estate lots. Now, we're doing to the south side what we've done to the north side. The designation where it's 1/3 acre lots, I live on a 1 acre third lot there in Depot Square. I can't see picking my house and my lot up and putting it on Chester Road or Airline Road or back that direction. I think now's the time with this future land use map, we're going to tell developers, we're going to tell people, this is how we're going to look in 10 years. So we need to do this right. We don't need to hurry through this. If we need to take a little more time, get more input, take our time, and each one of these little spots that needs addressing, let's do that. I agree with Mrs. Caraway about the orange area that she was discussing. That's a large area right there. And high density right there? No. The area here on Highway 70, right there along railroad tracks, where it was decided, well, we're going to allow townhomes there. I mean, where did that come from? Then again, we're reducing the sizes again. We can't, when we eliminate all the estate and start adding these smaller lots, we're doing it for the developers. They make the money on it. I mean, it always affects us. On Airline Road, when they put that commercial development up there, we were told, we're going to need a red light there someday. It's already bad down there. The roads on Chester and Airline, they're dangerous. There's no doubt about it. We're saying we're trying to recruit some of our money from the sewer. Well, I think what we need to really do is leave everything estate and let's improve the roadway system first. Once we improve our roadway system, then you could actually say, okay, well, hey, look, we could open this area up, but let's don't pile a lot of homes in an area like that, and then they can't go anywhere. Everybody's going to have to be driving four-wheel drives to get to and from. I'd like to see the estate put back in place. There's other things that we can do at a later time.
Mrs. Pardue.
I want to reiterate what we said at the first reading, that I really appreciate all the work that you committee put together. I know it was a lot of time, it was a lot of effort. You guys have done a wonderful job. I think that there are still a couple of areas that I have concerns. They're the same ones I had concerns with in the first reading. Thank you for fixing the commercial on White Oak. So that looks much, much better. And then obviously south of 40. So the issues that I brought up in the first reading, I still have concerning the estate properties between the Pinkley and Donaldson. I think that for a while we have talked about always wanting good estate lots. And now that we have the momentum going there, I would hate to see us stop that. And for those that have invested along Chester especially, in those estate lots, building those new homes, I would like for us to take some efforts to protect those as well. And then the third issue I had concerning estate properties, and I understand, you know, it being a holding pattern in some sense, but when we have these areas, I would like for them to be more of an established zoning, you know, category, what have you, instead of the holding pattern. Because like it was mentioned, when you see the sewer, when it gets taken down even further south of 40, those will all get, you know, recategorized into other subdivisions and what have you. So I would prefer that we keep more of the actual estate property. And so I would prefer that we leave that area south of Pinkley, north of Donaldson, as the state. And then issues.
Can you put your pointer up on that again?
The who?
No, I want to put her pointer up where you're talking about.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It was
Just so everybody knows.
Yeah.
Right there.
Previously, yeah, there we go. And then for the properties, so north of the Pinkley subdivision and west, I know one of the alternate proposals that we have is to make more of that yellow, take the orange out and make more of that yellow.
That's the one that's up there.
Yes. And so what I'd like to even look at the possibility of making all that orange yellow to airline. I think we have enough orange down closer to 64 that we don't have to have that large section there. And so I would like to look at that possibility as well. And I think part of that, we have the high density that's at the trails and it's at Shaw's Ridge. And I think it serves its purpose there. But to add even more around it, I think only congests that area even more. So those are the main issues I think that haven't already been brought up by others.
Mr. McKee.
Mr. Reader, what was the percent of estate on the previous map?
3.4% of the previous map.
It's our total before.
Total townwide, the existing one in place right now is just over 3%, 3.4%.
And what is this new proposal?
We've increased it to 12.7, so almost 10% more.
So I think we all know that the difficult part is that we feel like where the sewer is not where estate was originally. I mean, where estate was originally. And so it's like, well, we don't need sewer there. Because if it's a state, and well, unless it's 1 acres, right? And so that's where the tough part comes of trying to make a long-term wise decision on what the town and taxpayers have invested up to this point on it. And if we want to move away from that and really reduce the need for the sewer that's been there, I mean, it's this board's decision to make it. I just think that if we're going to vote on something tonight that we need to be thorough about it and make sure that we're thinking that through. And if we're, redoing the whole map sitting here at the board and over the last 2 weeks, I don't want this to be political. And that was my hesitation when we started this process to try to do this at this time, was that not that the people up here would make it political, but the people that are supporting candidates and things like that would. And that's not what this is about. This truly is trying to make the best decision for our town long term. And I think every person on this board means that. But I do think that we need to sit with some reality that there is property that we ran sewer, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, for the developments up to Chester with the intent that it extends on and develop. And so, it's a hard decision, but at the same time, I know that there are many people that move to this area with thinking that they're moving to large estate lots and everything's around them is going to be estate. But I would say that there were subdivisions that people are living in right now that somebody owned property near those as well. One of those is sitting 2 seats next to me that went through the growing pains 15 years ago with a neighborhood behind them. And so it's just hard, and growing pains are hard. But I look at how can we reduce cost to the taxpayer on sewer fees and keeping, as we grow as a town, keeping those taxes low as possible. And if we don't allow some development to occur, then your sewer fees are always going to stay high because you don't have anywhere to disperse the usage of what we currently have along more people. And I'm not saying 5,000 homes, don't get me wrong, but anyways, I don't know if I'm getting anywhere, but that I think this board's trying to be serious about this and trying to make wise decisions, but at the same time, there's 7 people up here and we're trying to make it work. And so my ask is that let's see if we can figure out something that all of us can agree upon enough to be able to vote for. And if we can't, then we may need to discuss this further.
Everybody's going to have a chance to talk again if they want, but I'm just saying. But Mr. Brooks?
All right, I'll give you all a small history lesson. If you want to talk about growing pains, I moved out here in '79, and the house I live in at the end of Lamb on Memphis, Arlington, was one of probably 20 in between the airport and Lakeland. If you don't know where the airport was, it's right across the street. I didn't ask for a middle school. I didn't ask for a subdivision behind me. I didn't ask for a subdivision across from me. I didn't ask for a sewer treatment plant. I didn't ask for any of the other subdivisions in town. But I do realize that as a town grows, you have to provide services for the community. Schools, fire, roads, all the infrastructure, everything has to be paid for out of your tax dollars. So one gentleman asked, why don't we improve the roads first? Well, the point of improvements is to allow the development to make those improvements. We don't make improvements to draw a developer out here. If you want to build, you want to come out here, you're going to make those improvements. We're not going to do them for you. There was another gentleman that asked, why did my house property go from green to yellow? Your property, in the layout of the grand scheme of things, is still green. Your property is still in a state-sized lot. That's not going to change unless you sell it to a developer. Then it will change. It's not getting changed just because the color on the map changed. It's not going to happen. 2 weeks ago, most of this board was in somewhat of an agreement of how we were going in this direction here, and I get back tonight after mass hysteria on Facebook all weekend, the last 5 days, of mudslinging, name-calling, and Mike's. I'm sitting next to the devil if you listen to Facebook. People, you got to pay attention. These people are your neighbors. Your neighbors are sitting beside you up here. And the mob mentality is just insane. Talk to your neighbors. Don't throw rocks at your neighbors. Everybody sitting up here is trying to do what's best for everybody in here, including themselves. I, for one, have absolutely nothing to gain by any decision I make up here. I own 1.25 acres, sitting on the same piece of property since 1979. I get up every day, I put my shoes on, and I go to work just like most of the people in here. I'm not gaining anything by decision I make up here. Please stop throwing rocks at your neighbors. These people are up here doing the best job they can do, and they're listening to you. I promise you they're listening to you. They're not ignoring what you're saying. They're paying attention to you. Stop the name calling. Stop the craziness. Stop hurting people's families. Please. Thank you.
Mr. McKee.
Yeah, well, I'm going to look at it a little different. I want
Make
to
sure
talk.
you pull your microphone.
I want to talk to the attorney about it. This is not a zoning. This is a future land use map, just like we did in 2009, correct?
That's correct. Ms. Reader said that this is the future land development plan. When, as y'all know, when we have a rezoning request, it comes from Planning Commission, comes to this board for 2 readings and a public hearing. One of the criteria you consider was you look at this land use plan to see is it in somewhat general conformance with the land use plan. And you try to adjust that to see that if there's some, that's why these things are guidelines and they have ranges of different varying, could be RS-18, could be RS-22, could be this commercial, could be that. You look at more specific when it comes in for a rezoning application. This doesn't change anything or rezone anything. It doesn't obligate you to rezone in the future. If you remember, we've had other times that we've had rezoning requests that have been requested that were in conformance with the plan, and we turned it down and said, no, this is not what we want to see at this time. This is for future use, but not use. We've been challenged. We've had lawsuits to that effect, but we won every time as long as the board has justifiable reasons for turning it down in the future.
So for clarity, you did just say that does not obligate, there's the current one or the future one,
No.
which does not obligate. Okay,
This is one of 4 or 5 criteria that you consider when you're considering a rezoning application.
Okay. Sorry, Ms. McKee, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was, you and I have talked about it. Some people just didn't have a complete grip that this is not changing our zoning at all. The zoning stays the same where it is now, and you still got to go through everything you would have to do if this was changed. So it's the same thing. But the other questions I got on the legal issues, we have to provide certain things. We have to have some minimum house sizes. We got, to stay within the laws. We got to have places for people to, or for business to go. Either way, whether this has changed, where the dotted lines are right now, go back to work, like Cheryl's asked for, or it does not. Can you defend the town of Arlington either way, what that is?
Yeah, I think it's a defensible position. I mean, if the board chooses to have, again, the land use plan is what you would for a future. If you have, assuming it gets changed to yellow, or the recommendation Ms. Reader suggested where yellow is RS-18, RS-22, the proposed change was to make it a rezoning request that came on the lower density residential, which would be RS-22 and not 18. That's what the highlighted red on the screen is.
You're talking about where the dotted lines are.
More half-acre lots.
Now, that's 18 and 22, the way it stands by looking at it right now, correct? As a board, can a board say nothing's less than the 22 in this area?
Yes.
You can specifically say that by what? By condition, by minutes, how you do that?
Again, all that property is currently state. So if someone wanted to change that, do anything, they would have to bring a rezoning application. The planning commission would look at it, it would come back before this board. There would be a public hearing, notice sent out to the public. More likely you would see what they're proposing, what their overall density. But if you said that no, we think it may be RS-22 in the future, but not right now. We think this is sewer hasn't yet extended to this area. We want to see somebody come back and just say, no, this is, we want to see 1.5 units an acre. We don't want to see, 2.4 units an acre over here. I think as long as you can defend that, and there's justification, and the
you know, the board has deliberates. Basically, the court is not going to substitute their judgment for that of the board, as long as there's a deliberation and nothing is illegal, arbitrary, or capricious in the decision that was made. So, again, this is just one factor to be considered.
What you're saying is it's similar to what was on Donaldson when they came for rezoning, asking for rezoning. They asked for a 15, and this board said, no, we think a 18 is more appropriate for there.
Is more appropriate. In fact, the planning commission they had a density that they could have had several units higher per acre than it was actually approved, but the planning commission, this board said, no, we want to keep the density even lower, which is probably closer to even, RS 22, even though they had RS 18 zoning.
Right.
The density was approved was actually closer to half acre units.
And just so we all understand, when we say R22, do we mean
Half acre.
22,000 square, 22,000 square. We say 18, we mean 18,000. 15 means 50. Just so everybody understands what we're saying on that. You know, I'm okay with changing that myself, even though I know we've put sewer down there. I understand that. I don't know what's going to go there, even if it is that, because it could change again. Because, you know, developers, when they come in, they're probably going to come in with a planned development, wouldn't you think?
That's been the trend that we've seen.
Yeah.
For the last 10 years.
So either way is fine. Whatever the board, you guys want. And Mike, your opinion on this, I'm good with it too. Just because you live in that area doesn't, I think that you will speak for how you feel for the town of Arlington. I'm okay either way. Look, right behind me was a state. I was young on this board. Yes, I was young one time. I was young on this board. It come before us as somebody wanting to put a subdivision at R15. And this was back 10 years ago. And I voted for an R15. And now what we're going to have behind me is an R15 planned development, 90-foot lots, 95-foot lots. But we're getting a lot of common open space. You could see the same thing come to this area someday. So I'm okay with either way. Even though we've got sewer there, I'm still okay. If this board wants to put that area back like it was, that's fine with me. Okay. Either way. But Mike, your opinion does matter to me.
I'll let Mr. Biggs go. But I do, real quick, I don't know if I can, you want me to wait till after you? I was going to ask, because he brought up a good point that the board, I think everybody's clear on, but he brought up a good point on planned development versus what we call straight zoning. And I don't know if you want to talk first or just get a definition of what straight zoning is, because if it's like my subdivision, just so everybody knows, straight zoning is Pinkley is straight zoning. It's Pinkley going in there. And what you say about straight zoning is if it's 2-acre lots, somebody come in and build 2-acre lots, they don't have to really come before this board and put entrance ways. They don't have to put in open space or curb and gutter, parks. I mean, they can do a straight zoning, which is, I hate to say, kind of a plain Jane subdivision. And we have some nice homes in our subdivision. We have some that are just average. That's the way it goes. It's a straight zoning subdivision. Whereas you have some of these where they come in and they ask for a planned development. That's where you see the nice entranceways coming into them, or you see walking trails. And usually that's when if you've seen me respond sometimes, that's the give and take from the town, not from any one person up here from the town saying, you know what, you were supposed to have 18, RS 18, we'll let you have RS 15 because you're going to put in a swimming pool, you're going to put in walking trails, you're going to put in soccer field, whatever you're going to put in there, you're going to basketball. There's been all kinds of discussions. So I just want everybody to know that even if something's zoned a certain way, there's control by the town, or there's not control by the town. There's more control by the town on a planned development than there is a straight zone. And so in a straight zone, sometimes you may not get what you want, but you think you're getting what you want because whether it's the size of the lot, but you may not be getting the quality of homes, you may not be getting the aesthetics of it, I guess you would say. So, sorry, Jeremy. Go ahead.
Just to add to that, just so you understand too, the only part you didn't touch on, or I didn't touch on, the difference between a straight zoning and a planned development, the major difference to me is on a planned development, you can require a minimum size house built on it. A straight zoning, they can come in on a 2 or 4 acre lot and put 1,000 square foot home on it, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. So sometimes you want planned development, but you want to make sure you get everything out of it the town can get. Common open space, the entrance. You want to make sure you got some, good brick columns on for your fences. If you want dog parks, if that's what that area wants, that's whatever you get. But the major thing to me is on a planned development, you make sure you get the minimum square foot home put on it. That's the key to me, the advantage you have for a planned development to me is that compared to another. Who's going to put 1,000 square foot home on a 2 acre? I don't see that, but they could. So that's just a definition of it.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Biggs.
I think one thing I want to clarify, because I think there's been some miscommunication. The first reading, because you vote for something, to approve something on the first reading, doesn't mean that you support it. It just means that you're willing to let it go to a second reading, and if you have concerns, then you get with staff and you share those concerns. So I think there's been some miscommunication that the people who voted for this on the first reading, that it was unanimous, that we all thought it was great. I think a couple of us shared some concerns at the first reading. One of those, and the mayor mentioned this, a phone call that I talked to him about with the section above Pinkley. When I saw it, that was one thing that stood out to me. Even on the old map, the largeness of the higher intensity or suburban residential, which is, I think, 3 dwelling units on an acre. But that was one thing that stuck out to me as soon as I looked at the map. The other thing that stuck out to me, and just so you know, this whole process has been rushed. We got this a couple of days before the first reading. So we didn't have a great amount of time to get with staff or to discuss this or to do research when we got it. So I do feel like, I think Alderman Harmon said that the whole process has been kind of rushed. I think even speaking to a committee member, they even felt some pressure to be rushed because they were trying to get this completed before, Angela left. So I do like the fact that the orange has been reduced above Pinkley. I even mentioned it at the beginning when I first saw this again with the proposed changes with that going to yellow, that I still felt that area of orange is too large. I do think we need neighborhoods like that, but I envision more pocket neighborhoods, not one huge sprawling big neighborhood with that type of density. Also, my biggest concern with the area below Pinkley is, if you look at the whole map, that's not a picture of the whole map, but I think we missed the boat a little bit years ago, not designating more area above Interstate 40 as a state, having a couple of pockets up there where we had some estate mixed in with some of the other neighborhoods. And so I see that as an opportunity to have a state and actually have it get developed, because that is an area that's probably going to be one of the next areas to be developed. So adding the estate, I think, is essential to our future. If you think about it, I was thinking about this, my neighbor, I hate to bring her up her name, but Ashley Onsby, she just moved. She just moved from, I live in a yellow up above, and she moved to one of the estate lots down below a couple of weeks ago. Family of 4. They're using the same services that I'm using in their estate house. They got 2 kids in school. They're using the same roads, but now they're paying a lot more in property taxes than the people up there. If you want to keep, in my opinion, a way to try to help maintain and keep our property taxes low is to have more estate lots. Those people are paying a lot in property taxes. You kind of got me off my train of thought. one thing I wanted to ask Gerald. So it's been said that this is not zoning, this is just a future land use plan. But in the future, when a developer brings a project that meets this plan but not our current zoning, doesn't it make it more difficult and more likely that we would be brought into a lawsuit if they met this plan and we denied them?
Yeah, it's one criteria. Like I say, there's 4 or 5 criteria we can do a rezoning. And so one of the criteria is you look for conformance with the land use plan. So if somebody brings a rezoning application that's not anywhere near in conformance with the land use plan, it's easier than not. If it's in conformance with the land use plan, it does, there's one reason to approve it, so it would be more difficult to turn it down. You still have the other factors in consideration, like we talked about. I went back and actually looked at the lawsuit we had on Walker Street 10 years ago, because there was actually a good example, because we're also rezoning in part of this. There's some areas that are going from residential to commercial that could be converted. And that was the situation out of Walker. It was proposed commercial, but was residential in the area. You think the board at that time said, yes, it's on the land use plan, but we don't feel like it's appropriate at this time. And we were upheld in that lawsuit and that thing. So it's not automatic, but yes, it does make it more difficult to turn something down if one of the elements is in conformance with the land use plan. But it doesn't mean you have to.
One of the things that I talked to staff about, in the work that you guys did, there were 6 or I think maybe 7 recommendations. I have a concern. 3 of those recommendations were recommendations almost 10 years ago when it was, when you went through a revision 10 years ago. I have a concern that there's not a timeline on some of these recommendations. I actually think some of those recommendations are really good. A gentleman mentioned the, creating special areas and having a plan for those special areas. So I do have a concern as well that we don't have a timeline for those recommendations. I don't want to be in a position where in 10 years we go through this again and 3 out of the 6 or 7 recommendations are still open. So.
We did add some language because you mentioned that last time. This is for the next 10 years, and we did add language in the version that you got for this meeting that said that we should continue to update. It should be an ongoing to ensure we're meeting them as we reach that 10-year goal. So that language was put in because you made the comment last time.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, we'll go back around here in a second. I guess try to start getting towards a conclusion on this, because I don't think realistically we're all that far off. I mean, honestly. I mean, just because of the plan and what Mr. Biggs said, the unanimous thing, like I said, that's where the political stuff came in. Everybody had the chance to speak last week, whether if people feel it was rushed, it's not rushed. In my opinion, it may have been rushed by a document or something, maybe in somebody's eyes, but I'm saying this started with last October when people were asking about mixed use, because we found the loophole in our mixed use. And then I know we've been here prior, and I had to go back and look at the meetings or listen to the minutes, but February, March, somebody, we were sometimes asked at a meeting, or asked, staff was, when are we gonna have something for mixed use? So this whole plan was really more mixed use driven for the most part. But staff and town and us as a board were given the task of saying, taking the existing one, which I think even myself looking at it closer, which there's things in the current one, I'm like, man, I can't believe, where I live, I can't believe that's zoned like that. I can't zone, or shows that on the land use map. Well, I mean, I'm sure that I wasn't on this board 10 years ago when y'all went through this, but I'm sure there was, I don't know if there was contention then there too, or there was misunderstanding or misinformation. It's just that nowadays we live in a quick answer and want answers fast society, so it makes things more tough. But what I'm trying to get at is we have had a chance to talk about this, If this board feels that we need to put it off, this was never supposed to be political. This was supposed to be, and I think any one of us thought it was going to be political. I know you said that you had some concern about that, but I'm just saying, I think if we really thought that this was going to end up being, it wasn't anything around election time or anything like that. This was something that's been in the works for many months. Our planner is leaving due to military. She will stay on a consulting role, so we were trying to wrap it up before she's leaving, because we will be in a consulting role, because it's hard to find new planners that are good to come to this town, that are going to represent this town. Just so you know, everybody on that committee is a resident of this town. Mrs. Reeder, our planner, is a resident of this town. Miss Durant, our attorney, everybody's a resident of this town, and that's where sometimes I think things get, everybody thinks, well, somebody's doing this, or you're doing this, you're doing this. We're all residents, we all care. Everybody cares. And to your comment, I can't imagine. I mean, like I told the story, I think, at the last meeting. You know, I dated a girl out here in high school, and I never dated her again because it was too far out. It was too rural, you know. So I just couldn't. I lived in Bartlett, and I thought this was too far out. So what I'm saying is I can't imagine what some of these people have seen grow over the years. And as we are looking at what can possibly be, again, this is an overview, what it could look like years down the road. We have a task to do as elected officials. And I've always told everybody, I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear, I'm going to tell you what you need to hear. I rode around with a guy for an hour and a half yesterday, the same thing about an issue. So nothing, the political side of it needs to be taken out of this, and just say, how far off are we really? Because to Mr. Biggs' point, when I was asking at the public meeting, at the other thing, the whole area up there being yellow too, because I said the same thing. If somebody's going to come to us, they're either going to come with the half-acre lots, or they're going to ask for a planned development, which has that, what they call a bump or a formula that you can add some stuff. So why not set it higher? We'll see where it goes. And we know eventually, whether any one of us are sitting on this board in 2, 4, 6 years, whatever, that another board's going to be up here still having to make those decisions. It's town staff, planners, whoever, and it's going to come. We just have to figure out how we can do it. We don't have the authority just to put a freeze on the rest of the town. And I think that's where some of the misconception comes in, that we can just stop everything. We can't do it like that. We have to do it in a smart way, and that's what this overlay is supposed to do. And it's taking one that, honestly, 2 weeks ago, whether everybody agreed with the new one now or not, the old one, I don't think anybody agreed with it completely, with all the stuff that was on there, especially the mixed use. So a lot of good has come out of this. There's been some good discussion. In my opinion, we're at a point, and we'll go back around, that we just, we can make amendments or to this, or do we have to, if we make any changes, do we need a motion or anything to change this? Because
Yeah, I would suggest if you're going to make anything besides the 4 changes that were directed last time, I would say we make an amendment to the.
Okay. Well, we'll get to that in a second. I just want to make sure. But, I mean, so far I've heard yellow from basically along the interstate all the way up to Pinkley. So that would all be yellow. That's kind of what I've heard, I think, from several up here in consensus. And then the area rectangled in yellow to green. To me, that's an easy fix. That's an easy, we can do it, because it's still not gonna, it's not changing the zoning. It still doesn't mean that somebody in 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 years, or 20 years comes in and wants to say, you know, they want to put bigger lots up there or smaller lots down there, and a board's gonna still have to deal with it, correct? So,
The change of yellow east of Chester would actually be reducing the currently allowed long-range planter. So if we change it to yellow, it would actually be reducing it.
and when you say reducing that, explain that real fast.
So right now, all that area east of Chester is orange, which is a medium density. So this plan and this proposal would actually reduce it down to just a low-intensity
Yes.
residential instead.
Reduce the lot, increase the lot sizes, what that means.
Reduce the numbers of units per acre.
Reduce number of units, yes, increase lot size. Okay. All right. So I just kind of wanted to try to wrap that back up, because, again, I live on 2 acres. You said you wanted to hear from me. I live on 2 acres. I love it. I wish nothing would change. I mean, that's my honest opinion. I moved out there thinking, man, nothing's going to change. Again, you probably heard me say this. Milton Wilson wasn't a road when I moved out here. Now I drive down it every day. So it does change, whether we always can control that or not. We can try to guide it in the best way we can. But I will say, all the time talking to people, I will say, I don't always hear estate, I do hear larger lots. Everybody's definition of larger lots is different. Windsor Place is one of our most sought after subdivisions, but so is Dawson's Landing. So I mean, those are the two that probably sell like hotcakes faster than anything. And those are some are half acre and some are, what are Dawson's Landing there? Because what we're hearing is, to Mr. McKee's comment earlier, is it's sometimes the quality of home more sometimes than the size of the lot. The size of the lot, I'm telling you, I cut mine in my parents' yard every 5 days, and that's the one part I hate about living on 2 acres. But I enjoy it. That's my quiet time. But anyway, so I'm just saying, that's the challenge of this board. I know you guys have heard a lot of talking and a lot of different sides of it, and I think this board is not that far off. Again, last week or 2 weeks ago when we voted on the thing, it was a first reading. It was one that we approved to get to the second. Sometimes you vote for something to get something in the end that you want. That's what a voting no 2 weeks ago doesn't change anything. A voting yes gets us to this point where we get to actually make some progress and get this thing worked out the way we want it. So that's what I want people to understand. So if there's any other discussion to kind of wrap up, and if not, then let's either, the way I see it is we make a couple of options. We either make some motions to amend, and from what I hear from a couple people, just turn all yellow basically along 40 down to Pinkley from that line. That's what I've heard from a couple people. And then turn the rectangular in green. And if everybody's in agreement with that, we can wrap this up pretty fast. But if not, then we can keep going for as long as y'all want.
Repeat that.
Which would be this alternative here?
The alternative, that's the alternative there.
Yeah.
So the area west of Chester, which is what Mr. Biggs was saying a second ago too, that's what he and I talked about, that would be yellow too. Correct? So correct all the way, basically anything along the interstate, yellow. So where Chester Road is, where you see it up top, Pinkley's right there. Yellow on both sides, and then the yellow in between Donaldson and Pinkley would be green, and that's what I heard from most people. I don't know. I'm not making the motion yet. I'm trying to make sure that's what I'm hearing, and let's see if that's the direction we're going, or we put this on hold. Mr. Harmon.
Personally, I say we revert it all back to estate. With the future land use map, like I said, I think we really need to give it, the developers and everybody, a direction as far as how we want it to look, as far as larger lot sizes. The future land use map is very critical because it will enable the developer to come in and almost have our hands tied on approving something. The project that they were talking about 8 years ago down Walker was right next to me. I'm in a residential neighborhood, historic district. Future land use map said all this row of houses, including the vacant lot beside me, can be commercial. And I'm like, really? And it was almost approved. There's a 3-2 vote, and we actually saved our neighborhood on a technicality.
What's that?
That's what that future land use map will do. I say if we need to make it estate, add a few other areas to add further protection. If the developers want to come in, we make them jump the hoops. If they can jump the hoops and get it passed, that's good. But I guarantee you, when they come to ask for it, I think these people will be here to help us guide it.
Well, again, remember, a state can be 1 acre with sewer still. So that's one thing that's got to be clarified. So 1 acre with sewer is also a state. So I think Mr. McKee or Ms. Pardue had a question or something.
I'm going to let him go.
We were both talking about it, trying to.
I think that's what they were talking about. So
some type of positive solution for everybody in the scenario. So where the green part of above north of Pinkley, if you had some of that is still 1 acre.
Like the old map was yellow there.
To the west side, that's correct.
Yeah.
If you look at the old map where it was yellow, if you left that as 1 acre ability or a state ability, because it'd be able to be sewered potentially. And then the rest of that portion because it is near the interstate, leaving that as yellow, so it could be developed in an RS-22, potentially RS-18, PD potential on those. But that would give some buffer to the existing neighborhood there that's in that. Below it, I mean, I'm up for recommendations on that. And then where the green star is, that's right in the middle, is that where a park?
It's just a suggestion of.
Suggestion of park, right.
Just because of the general vicinity, not any designation.
Sure.
for anyone's property.
And we don't own that land or anything, yeah.
And then south of that green star is some pretty decent sized acreage there. Could you move that into the yellow area so that you end up with some of that is not as high density, but is still a suburban residential on that? So you move some of the yellow over.
So are
You still have the
saying-
orange or brown or whatever. I'm maybe colorblind. It looks kind
You
of,
saying everything east of Airline Road?
not everything east of
Well,
Airline.
those are large, those are long, they're same parcel, that's why I'm asking.
So let me,
Go over and put your hand on it.
so if you move this property line here, that runs here, that we currently have, is this, I'm gonna call it tan, because I can't,
That's orange.
Orange, I think.
is moving that yellow across the there as well. Okay? Moving where there used to be on the land use map, where currently is right now, where this is yellow. Right? So right now, currently, this would allow RS-22, RS-18 on the current land use map. If we created a buffer there, 1 acre lots or 1 to 2 acre, depending on how the state falls with.
Well, there's a different zoning, correct, Mr. Laws? I mean, there's RS 40,
That
We
would
don't
carry,
have ours.
We don't have RS
We have-
43.
We have a state. which
that
is
would
1
carry
acre
you from your
per
2 to
acre.
1 to.
We
Yeah.
have a state, and they get to dictate whether it's moving 1 acre or 2 acre, depending on whether it's
Sewer.
sewerable or not. And then leave the rest of this as yellow, because I just don't see that, me personally, that people are gonna build on the state lots right on the interstate. I don't see that happening. And then this is still a conversation that, I mean, I don't have a full answer, but that was my recommendation, is increasing our RS-22-18 here and create a pocket right here that would still protect that neighborhood that's developed already there with a state around it.
okay.
A lot of sense.
Is that what y'all in consensus with that, or is that you?
Yeah, I do like that. How, anybody know how many acres that is above Trails of Arlington? You said that was mostly-
About,
Well, north of that dotted line, a lot of that's not even
Usable.
Hall
developable.
Creek sewer, I mean, it's a Hall Creek drainage basin, a lot of it is.
It's
You
just
can't do
bottom
anything
land,
with it.
correct? It's not even
The
developable
geography of the
property.
land wouldn't allow you to do much with
Very
it.
deep creek.
Very deep creeks.
Very deep.
It's a huge fall off.
All the creeks over there are
There's
deep,
a lot of topography that comes into play on that,
so.
including floodway, floodplain.
Yes, ma'am.
Most of Arlington's floodway, floodplain.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So circling back around this side, yes, Mr. Brooks.
I'm actually good with that. Works for me. That
I
would
hope somebody's
allow,
taking notes.
that would allow you to go from 2 acre lots to 1 acre lots to half acre lots. So you're building a smaller buffer in the interstate, like you said, nobody's gonna build an estate-sized lot backing up to a noisy interstate. I just don't see that happening personally either. The change down from the orange over to the yellow,
Makes sense.
it makes sense. I'm okay with it.
I
I'm
am
flexible.
too.
So basically, again, that's what I was asking you a second ago. That's basically Airline Road is that cutoff. East of Airline Road, there's basically no orange going, it's all yellow, and then some of the yellow is turning green, is basically what we're saying.
East of Airline.
Airline Road.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where
Yes, that's correct. Yes. I heard airline, I was looking at Chester.
Yellow here, yellow here, green here.
I think that's still up for the debate and the conversation.
That's what I'm hearing, so I just want to make sure we're all pointing in the same direction.
And again, I'm the one that said that, I think you can make some good, if we're really redrawing everything, it might be better to put this off the work session or have the same, because like I said, there's a lot of other considerations in how everything, you start changing more, changing some of the orange to yellow or some of the yellow back to green, and then if you start changing everything, it affects a bunch of other stuff. My suggestion would be, we have the engineer and the planner and the staff have a work session maybe with the planning commission and really look at it and making that dramatic changes.
Involve us.
Well, that's what, a joint work session.
Well, you should do that, you know, I'm good with that too, but you need to have some options when you run into your legal part that you're talking about. What do you do if?
Yeah, well, none of that. I think there's some engineering, some other planning concerns. If we're gonna make that big of a changes, because like I said, this, when we said it was a rush process, this was not a rush process. It's been going 6 or 7 months, so I feel like what we're doing is maybe rushing tonight, we can make significant enough changes on the new thing. We're reverting some things back to green or changing some yellow, orange to yellow is one thing, you're changing some stuff. But if you're gonna make significant changes on South 40, I think you're better off maybe joining to a joint work session with the planning commission and the staff and try to address all ramifications of how all this change.
Okay. I have no.
That's up to the board. I mean,
Yeah, I have no problem with that either. It's just, I just want to make sure that we're clear on the definition, because if we all walk out of here, even tonight, with what we're proposing and what staff would bring back, whether it's zoned to state, we still have to remember, and I think everybody's clear on that, but we have to remember that that doesn't necessarily mean that there couldn't be 1 acre all through a state with sewer,
it
with
doesn't
sewer.
mean that you couldn't have 15,000 square.
Yes, I know it doesn't mean you couldn't have that either.
Even in the state, you can have a PUD overlay. So what it means is it's your overall density. So if there's a sewerable development that comes through, even in the green estate, it doesn't mean you're gonna get a 1 acre lot. You may get 10,000 square foot lots with
a bunch of green space.
with a bunch of green space and everything. So
It still averages 1 per acre or whatever,
it's
so.
still averages 1 per acre. So what we're talking about is not really lot size, it's density of units per acre. And that's the important thing to remember. Even though we label it RS22, estate, RS15, RS13, those correspond with, like the mayor said, a straight subdivision. If they don't come to you, they just come to the planning commission, and they have 150 feet by 100 foot by 150 feet is what it takes to have an RS15 lot. It's 15,000 square feet. If you have 100, I'm not sure what thing. In a state, it takes 200 foot of frontage, and it's 200 by 400 is having basically a 2 acre lot. And everything that you're going to have. All that is variable in PUD because you can make combinations so that you get the walking trails, the dog parks, the entrances,
A lake.
the nicer streets, the nicer lighting, the minimal square footage on houses. So all that. So yeah, I don't want to confuse that. This means you're going to have a state 2 acre lots because you leave it green. You can still have another development that comes in smaller. You just won't have your overall density more than 1 unit per acre.
So legally, that's where you're saying, that's the legal thing. So I hope everybody heard that. It's just, it still doesn't mean that anything, no matter what we put on this, there still doesn't mean everything's going to be a 2 acre lot from here on out. Okay.
It means your density won't be any more than 1 unit per acre if it's sewer.
Okay. All right. So I've heard all the recommendations. So do we want to make a motion to make some changes and then possibly come back for a joint work session? But we need to see the changes at the work. So we need to give, I don't know if we need a motion, do we just need to give staff direction
Yeah, I mean,
to,
once these changes we discussed tonight, staff can come up with, some well, like the 3 alternatives that we had, staff can work on from the suggestions. We can take your suggestions and come through with some different scenarios, and that's what the board wants to see, and put this back if you want to. I would suggest if you're making significant variations, it'd be a joint work session with the planning commission, since they invested significant time.
I agree.
More or less what you're saying is with the amount of changes you see that have been talked about up here right now, you would not recommend.
I mean, again, that would be my suggestion. If we're going beyond just some of the changes that have been proposed and everything come through, if you're going to make that significant changes, I think there's a lot of other factors that are going into consideration that it would be better to sit down and join a work session and punch off, have some laying out some time.
so, and I think that's what, I mean, I'm hearing from everybody on this board. So, I mean, I think we're at a plan right now where I think most of the board basically agrees wholeheartedly, but we do have to check and make sure that we've got the numbers right and everything right like that too.
Again, if you were making some variations from the other thing, if you want to just change the orange back to yellow and maybe some of the yellow to green or something like that, or what we in staff had proposed was that group, that area that's east of Chester, north of Donaldson, and south of Pinkley, is adding some language that basically would be RS 22 half-acre lots. And that was not done by changing the color, it was done by language added in there. Or even if you wanted to put that back into the state. I think those are definable enough that we could probably, as staff, discern what amendments you have. I think when you start making, let's kind of draw the line here, let's kind of move this over there, it makes a difference, and especially when you're splitting up among
A parcel.
property owners and everything, and parcels and everything. For the same consideration that Ms. Reader had changed, we had made the suggestion from the committee of changing the part yellow and part orange, because when somebody brings a development in that's mixed up, it makes a difference on where that actual line is. How many acres is yellow, how many acres is in orange, or how many, everything. It has an effect on how the application goes.
Okay, so do we just need to give guidance? I'm just trying to make sure we're doing this legally. Do we need guidance or do we need to make it a motion? That's what I need to know.
Well, you have a motion before the board, you can make a motion to table it, or until we get to a joint work session,
Okay.
I would say, if that's what you want to do. If you want to make a motion to amend it, we can make the amendment, you can vote it as is, with the 4 changes that were made last time. You can make it a motion to make some additional changes, or you can make it a motion to table it to a joint work session, and direct staff to make some further changes.
I would say we direct staff to make some of the changes that we just said and then motion to table to a joint work session. But the staff, I think, to make sure Ms. Reader, even in your consulting role, I guess, make sure you're clear. So you're clear on basically, and does anybody have anything? I don't want to speak for the board.
Yeah, if I could just make sure if anybody, I mean, we've had half a dozen public meetings with the subcommittee, and we had several other meetings, and if I don't get anything, I'm assuming everybody's good.
Yes.
No problem. So if you have comments, if you would please share them, because it's harder to respond night of. We like to have it all wrapped up for you in advance. So, yeah, absolutely. I think I understand what you were all
Yeah, where I just walked, I think, show what Mr. McKee did. So basically, east of Airline, and Mrs. Durant's about to get on me. East of Airline, orange, and then work on the area around Pinkley, and then south of Pinkley to Donaldson, and that rectangle that you were showing earlier is back to Moore State. Mrs. Durant.
There could be even more changes that you think of between her making these revisions tonight and the work session. The work session is for the purpose of honest conversation between the committee, the Board of Mayor and Alderman, members of the Planning Commission. What do you want to see? How do you want to see it? How does it play out? Rather than have Mr. Baker and Ms. Reader, who are both contractual employees, spend hours trying to discern what's been said here tonight. I would suggest that we take all of this to a work session, sit down around a table together, and determine what changes need to be made at the work session for them to be able to bring a finished product back for you for a second and final reading. Now, I will tell you that you've already had your public hearing, so you're not required to have a public hearing again.
But you can.
But you can.
But I think, again, I know you're saying with us, sit down and do it at the table, but I think if we can see that, if we can see what was just mentioned, have a, at the next meeting in their joint work session, see what that looks like and know what that's going to look like, and then hopefully make any minor changes.
When our attorney says, he's saying this for a reason, okay? And I think we should do that.
So,
I think it's getting overly complicated if we keep trying to amend it on the fly.
okay. Well, we haven't made a motion to amend. We were just giving staff guidance.
But if we're looking at all the suggested changes.
Yeah. Just trying to have a vision so they kind of make sure that they're clear. I think I think that's pretty much the consensus, but the consensus that we came up with tonight somewhat is troubling to staff to have to try to correct it on the fly. So I understand that. So do we want to make a motion based on some recommended changes? Staff has notes. Make a motion to table to a joint work session. Staff will get with us and try to set a date up, a joint work session with the Planning Commission sometime, probably, honestly, really next month sometime. And I mean, this isn't dire that it's got to be done now. It's just we were trying to wrap it up on a long process. So is everybody clear with that? Is everybody, any other suggestions before we make a motion to table? A motion to table?
Motion table.
Motion by Mr. McKee.
Second.
Second by Mr. Biggs. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes. We won't be offended if anybody's wanting to leave on any particular thing. I know a lot of y'all were here, it's late, so if y'all want to get up and leave, if you're not ready to stay for the meeting, we won't be offended, so.
I assume we're not tabling the rest of it.
No, we're not tabling the rest of the thing. So we are on any other old business, Mrs. Durant? We'll move on to new business. Item A, Resolution 2019-49 to authorize a land disturbance permit for Wilson Lake PD located at the north side of Forest, west of Maple Grove, east of Forest Park. We'll wait a second to get a motion. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Brooks.
Second.
Second by Mr. McKee. Discussion. Seeing none. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? That item passes. Item B, Resolution 2019-50 to authorize the award of bid and enter into a contract for the building I turned my papers over and made notes. They're a contract with Victor Hall Construction for the project known as Arlington Fire Station Number 2. Do I have a motion to approve?
Make a motion.
Motion by Mr. McKee, second by Mr. Biggs. Mr. Durant, is there anything you need to talk about on this, or?
The town of Arlington published the bid in the Daily News on July 30th, and the commercial bill on July 31st. Total of 8 bids were received. The lowest responsive bidder was Victor Hall. They've been fully vetted through our consultant, Michael Lavelle with Allen and Hoschel. The low bid is $3,604,000. Staff has reviewed and recommends approval at this time.
You've heard the recommendation by Mr. Durant. I've already made the motion. I'm sorry. Any questions or discussion? I got a little off track. I'm sorry.
I did see the dirt work was separate, correct?
Yes. Any other discussion? It's been a long time coming. Any other discussion or question? Seeing none, all in favor of the project say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes. Resolution 2019-51 to amend the Arlington Community Schools Board of Education budget for 2019-20 schools budget. Mrs. Durant.
The Arlington Community School Board did approve this at their last board meeting, and we submit this to you for approval to move forward. There will be another set of amendments in October, just to give you a heads up.
You've heard the recommendation. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Motion by Ms. Pardue, second by Mr. Brooks. We do have Mrs. I'm sorry, I forgot your name, Ms. Mason. Ms. Mason is here if there's any questions. Are there any questions for Ms. Mason or the schools? Sorry y'all had to be here so long. Thank you for being here.
Middle school's looking good.
There you go. All right, seeing no other further discussion, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes. Item D, first reading of ordinance 2019-09 to amend the Arlington zoning ordinance, Chapter 5, Section 5.4 to amend guidelines regarding mixed-use plan development. Is this to Mr. Lawson or Ms. Reeder? Ms. Reeder. Ms. Reeder. And remember, this is a first reading, kind of what we talked about earlier.
It is the first reading. So this was done in coordination with the future land use map update because, as we said previously, that was one of the things that kept coming up that triggered another item that triggered us to look at this was that we had some mixed-use development that didn't have a whole lot of guidance in our current zoning ordinance. So after going through the process with the subcommittee, one thing we did after paring it all down is look at where it ended up and talk about what we wanted. We came up with the language that you have in front of you. The red, if you look at the draft language, it's about a little over a page is what we added, and you can see that it's about 90% red, so it's a lot of new addition. The language is intended to just clarify the intent, to clarify that, you know, the kind of quality we want with these developments that are mixed use, to clarify that they have to be developed concurrently with any residential that's proposed and commercial, so that we're truly getting the mixed use. That was something that had been stated by board members previously. We called out the mix of uses that might be appropriate, stated that there must be at least 3 different uses and that each one should have at least 10% of the overall project to truly be considered a separate use in it. That was something that came about because we had some questions about projects who had smaller areas and did that, and should it qualify. So now we have some language in place that would allow us to justify requiring more. We called out residential uses should not constitute more than 30% of the overall area. Purpose of that is we didn't want someone to come in with a mixed-use project and their whole intent just to be to build residential and get that residential density with just a small amount. We truly wanted it mixed. So we put that cap on the residential. We didn't cap any of the other uses. We also reduced the density of the mixed use when we did that. So consistent with what was put in the future land use plan that you have, excuse me, where it was reduced down to 6 dwelling units an acre from the 8 that it's at right now. We reiterated that here to make sure people knew and there was no confusion, because there wasn't a density previously listed, which had caused some problems because we kept having to look for what would apply. We clarified that you have to have all utilities available, and then we set a size limit of 10 acres, gave ourselves some flexibility, and really the intent of that flexibility was in case we had a project in Depot Square area, like we've had one that's on the books right now, where it made sense. It was a good vertical mixed use with commercial downstairs and a couple units upstairs. You're not going to get a full 10 acres to do a project like that. So we added in that one flexibility that if something truly meets our intent, the board has the ability to say that it could be less than 10. But the goal was, like I said, the committee spent a lot of time trying to look at this and see what had we heard from the last several years and what the issues and concerns were about other projects. What do we like about them, and try to nail them all together into this language. So this is first reading. Planning Commission did consider this in August and recommend approval. We didn't have anyone speak at the public meeting at that time for it, so I don't have any public comments on it. But
you've heard the recommendation by Mrs. Reeder. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Brooks, second by Ms. Pardue. Again, first reading. We're kind of at a weird time with, not time of night I'm talking about, but that's late too. But what I'm saying is first reading, this could be the first item that somebody could vote on next month, whether we have 1, 2, or 3, 3 new members up here, 4, who knows, how it's, so I would I don't know, we may have to consider that when even just after the first reading tonight, that I don't know if it would necessarily be the first thing on the agenda next month, or if it's something, I don't know. It's one of those things we'll have to kind of play.
I would suggest it also be put on your work session agenda.
Sounds good.
It should go with each other.
Yeah, because it goes with the land use plan. Yeah, go. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So that's what I'm saying. We get the first reading out of the way tonight. Let's plan. So
What you're saying is the second reading be after the work session.
second reading will be after the work session, just depending on when the work session is. So,
Should be.
yeah, I agree. So, is there anything tonight that we'd like to guide staff on? Of course, you have time between the first reading, the second reading, and the work session. But if there's anything tonight that's critical to address or research, then we need to at least get that out there real fast.
I have a question, I
Mr.
guess.
sure.
The one thing that kind of stuck out to me was the 30%, limiting residential to 30%. So I was just thinking, and you guys have explained a little bit about, why you wanted to do that. But Bob Wilson's mixed use down by Depot Square, that where we had commercial on the bottom and he had like 10 units on top, that wouldn't meet that definition, right?
It also is allowed by right in Depot Square, so it's not necessarily a PD.
Oh,
but-
that's right, yeah.
But that's the one area in that we do permit it, so he was able to go through that process. For a straight mixed use, though, no, because the floor area for each would be the same. It would be a 50-50, just to be.
Okay.
So, do you have something, Mr. Brooks?
I can actually speak for the subcommittee, since we did spend probably 40% of our time was covering mixed use. Personally, I knew that was probably the hotter topic than the map, but turns out I was wrong. The map ended up being the hottest topic. I still think mixed use was personally was a hotter topic. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think the guidelines that we set forth are pretty good. I mean, we had nothing before, so this is a really good step in the right direction.
Definitely improvement.
Yeah, it's a huge improvement over what we started with. The thought process for the
Yes, it
30%
is.
and making them build it all at one time.
Right.
Keeps Myers Park, stuff from like Myers
Right.
Park from ever happening to us again. So really, if you read through it, if you've had time to read through it, I think you won't find a whole lot of flaws in it. You might want to tweak it a little bit here and there, but we also have that flexibility, like she stated earlier. We can change it from 30 to, well, something different if it fits the situation. So it was a lot of thought put into this, probably thought-wise just as much as the map, believe it or not.
And I think I don't want to say we're ahead of other people, but I think we were, in researching this, nobody had a good definition. Mayor McDonald called me this morning on his way to Nashville, and we actually talked a little bit about the mixed use. And I think everybody struggled with the definition. And so I think this is definitely something important. It's definitely something that is the trend nationwide. So we got to do the best we can with it. So anything over here before we just...
I have
Ms. Martin, go ahead. That's fine.
So on 5.4.1, item number 4, we talked about you could do the 10 acres that allows you to go into Depot Square. I think you and I, when we met, we said that maybe specifically we could just put Depot Square in that definition there. Or do you think that would not be needed at this point?
I mean, you could, we were trying to leave it somewhat open to give us the possibility. That was what was in, I think, in the back of our mind when the committee was looking at it. It's more up to the board. If you had somewhere that was 8 or 9 acres that made sense, this just gives us that option without tying our hands. It would still have to come in front of the board, and they would have to justify that they are truly providing all of these other things, connection, preserving open space, providing public spaces. I mean, we could go through the list to make sure they were meeting our intent and the kind of development we wanted. So.
That really would, other than that, then in that definition, I am perfectly fine. I think it's wonderful. I think you guys did a fabulous job on that. To your point, though, based on our ordinances and guidelines, we still can have a Myers Park. And so this only addresses neighborhoods with up to 30% residential. So if there's something else that proposes residential greater than 30%, it reverts to a T&D. So we would need to do this same thing with the T&D, the traditional neighborhood development.
And we've, as staff, have discussed that, and we'll bring in a proposal. It has to go back before the planning commission for a recommendation, and then before this board for 2 reasons, I think, because this was specifically for mixed use.
That's right.
The T&D is more a primarily residential, basically reverse 70% residential, 30% commercial.
Right.
This is one of the issues. If y'all want to bring it up at the work session, we can do that.
You brought that up at the planning commission. So does it have to go back to the planning commission first, or does it have to go?
Well, it does officially if we make the
Okay.
recommendation. What we can do is, so that we have some ideas of how you want to see it differently, because there's different ideas of, do you eliminate it? Do you make changes to the maximum allowable areas? Do you, are there any other changes? Do we want to change the density allowable units? There's different ways to handle it. If you want to add that to the work session, it would help to have some guidance before we just drag something to the planning commission and then change it.
So you
For the
said
T&D.
for the T&D, and you said you're working on something.
Well, we had, as staff had discussed it before, the thing, but
So-
it was an element of, does this board want to see it eliminated? Do they want to see, densities changed? We changed overall densities. That was allowable, 6 units per acre. In this, we reduced it down to 4. Is that correct?
8 to 6.
It
was 8
to 6.
I'm sorry, 8 to 6, everything. And then there are, I believe the T&D allows units up to 8 too. And so there's been some discussion of reducing it to 6 or 4, or eliminating the thing. different. This is a primarily commercial with residential element. That is a primary commercial with. I'm sorry, excuse me. Primary residential with more of a commercial element, as opposed to the neighborhood residential PD that is almost all residential with some neighborhood commercial. So it provides a different service, but yeah, it does currently sit there and it does allow up to 8 units per acre. So we wanted to bring that up and have some discussion. Staff can have some proposed changes on that. We can discuss that so we get some feedback at the work session.
But if you clearly define on your future land use map where you want the pockets of commercial to be, is the TND even necessary?
TND is allowed anywhere but industrial, which is the problem.
Everywhere but.
Everywhere but industrial. So it's allowed in every zoning district except industrial.
And it's a lengthy, really confusing, lots of ins and outs, if-then statements. So I don't think anyone's approached it, but if they did, it's intended for a primarily residential, think more of a little town with like a core, like the White Oak originally, what that was supposed to be. We don't have that many places where it would even make sense in town, but.
That was a goal of the last future land use plan. It was accomplished. Didn't benefit us.
At all.
I don't know that it still makes sense.
Need to be gone.
You're talking about the TND portion of it, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
No, you're fine.
Don't know that it makes sense.
We could approve this and add an amendment to eliminate the T and D altogether. No?
It's too significant a change.
Too much?
I wouldn't
Okay.
go with that.
Okay.
I think you need to, if you're gonna eliminate an entire district or something out, you'd want to take it to the planning commission and take two separate readings. I wouldn't feel comfortable just with, I mean, that would be like making a major zoning amendment just off this one.
Right.
I wouldn't recommend. If anybody challenged it, you haven't vetted that first.
Okay.
So kind of to that point though, with residential, just a residential development, there still is allowed up to 10% commercial.
Correct.
Right, so,
If you want a residential subdivision that has some elements of neighborhood commercial pocket, like, yeah.
which is what Myers Park has. So that still could be allowed in a residential development, not even a T and D.
Those densities are limited to no more than 3.3 units, depending on the zoning district.
Right. Which is close to what we have at Myers Park though, right? If I remember.
It's, I can't remember off the top of my head. I'll be
Not
honest.
far off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's pretty close.
Right.
Okay. So,
But that may be a lot for one person.
yes.
we can still do our first reading.
We get this first reading out of the way, and let's see what staff can come up with, and see if there's some recommendations from legal, from staff as far as the direction of a T&D, whether we even want to deal with it or not. But
We just need to make sure we
If
look
you
at all
don't, yeah,
avenues.
I was gonna say, we can address this, and if you have any other changes to the thing, we can do our best to have some stuff to discuss.
But it takes communicating with staff to make sure that we do that, and it's, yes, so.
I would encourage everyone to read it and look through it and say, I don't like this, I don't like this, I'd rather see this. And that would help us immensely to give Ms. Reader.
I didn't
So-
hear any comments about this one, though. Did I miss him? About the mixed use one that we're doing the
Well,
first
I
reading?
guess my question for you, Mrs. Reader, so you will be back next month at the Planning Commission next month?
I'll be back in a week and a half at the Planning Commission.
Well, I'm not talking, we won't have a joint work session in a
Yeah,
week and a
yeah.
half, I don't
Yeah,
think. So,
absolutely, and at the board meeting.
So, but if we could possibly schedule a work session before the Planning Commission that night,
We can put you on Skype.
still, no, she would be here. She would be here is what I'm saying.
I'll be
So-
here for the board meeting next month also.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if we, so, I don't know if that would be
Kinda
some
quick.
swearing ins and stuff like that, so I don't know what's gonna, that'd be tough to do it that night. I'm just trying to think of a time frame. So I guess we all agree that maybe if staff, time-wise, probably the Planning Commission next month, so some of this stuff we wouldn't vote on until November, as far as back before the board officially. Does that make sense? Is that okay?
That would be good, because that gives time for us to take in any other comments that you have, to look at it, to redo, see what the impacts of any of those changes are, bring
Okay.
that to you.
All right. So this is the first reading. So any other discussion? So do I have a motion to approve on the first reading? I mean, not a motion, all in favor of approving the first reading, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes. Any other new business, Mrs. Durant? I do want to say real quick before, I know that we have 4 members of the committee here, Ms. Howell, Mr. Thompson, Mr. Baker, of course, and then staff. Appreciate you all. I know it's been a long process. You guys have put in a lot of time, and time is hard to get back, and I appreciate the work you guys have put in. Any other, do I have a motion to approve the bills for payment? Motion to approve, by Mr. Brooks. Second. Any objection to paying the bills?
Nope.
Seeing none, that item is passed. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yep.
Motion by Mr. McKee, second. Any objection? Meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
That's what I need.